This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for this Manic Monday. It is 5/5/2014. Remember that, 555? Anyway, it's May 5th, 2014. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, father-son investigative team, taking the internet by storm. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of incredible radio programming, uncensored news, unbiased information, analysis, information that you need to know in these perilous times. The only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. Our glasses are being created, or should be created, coming out, so you can wear them in the face of tyranny, to look through the tyranny, look beyond the headlines, the bylines, the fog of disinformation, and to see what's really behind the people in the Ray-Bans, or no, what are those, aviators? Yes. Folks, thanks for checking in. For new listeners, we broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Our home base on the internet is HomelandSecurityUS.com, working on a couple of very interesting, very extremely, I think, timely and sensitive investigative reports that I'm sure will also be shared on CanadaFreePress.com. From Benghazi to Obama to Pelosi to Reid to you name it, it's coming. Just turn me loose. We're also simulcasting. I want to thank the Christians United Broadcasting Network. Thank you so much, Troy, for being there. There, you tune us in at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. 2 N's on Hagmann, the word and, spell it all out, Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. That's where you can find us in FM quality audio should BTR go awry. Folks, I want to mention that portions of tonight's broadcast are sponsored by NatureBox. I love this company. I really do. Order great tasting, healthy snacks directly to your door. Forget the salt-laden, sugar-laden stuff in your pantry, the vending machine, and get in shape for summer with healthy. And my emphasis is on healthy, very good tasting, very delicious treats like the Everything Bagel Sticks. It's one of my favorites, by the way. Support this program and get 50% off of your first order. That's right, half off of your first order. Go to naturebox.com/CFP-radio. That's naturebox.com/CFP-radio. Folks, we've got a great week planned for you. I wanted to mention, too, got a few emails from people who didn't check the website. We had to reschedule Steve and Pastor Langford. Actually, Steve and Pastor Langford did the rescheduling. Okay, so don't yell at me, although you did. Oh, my goodness, boy, did you ever. But anyway, next Sunday, Steve and Pastor Langford will be on, and we're looking forward to that program. And then I'll let Joe go over the schedule for the rest of the week, since he is the one who scheduled everyone for the rest of the week. But Joe, welcome.
Glad to be here. Hope my sound is okay. Probably going to have to switch microphones because I'm having to wiggle this wire around just to keep the crackling out. But anyway, no, we have a big week planned. Tonight we have Sheila Zielinski, who will be joining us in a moment. We have Stan Deo tomorrow night, as we do every Tuesday, second hour with Stan. Wednesday we have Bill Salas, author Bill Salas. He was a guest way back a few years ago, many times on our show, and we've since reconnected with him, and he'll be a guest on Wednesday for the first 2 hours. Thursday we will have Nathan Leal with us, and then Sunday we'll be doing the show with Steve and Pastor Langford. And while you get your or that other microphone.
Can you hear me? I'm actually I was actually contorted underneath the studio desk here to grab the wires from this microphone. I didn't connect mine, did I? Or disconnect mine, did I? Okay, good. I was contorted to grab this wire from this these headsets, and folks, these are very expensive headsets, so I want to make sure that we're not going to mess up the sound. A lot of news, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of information to get into. Benghazi. I just want to start out with this, and folks, I've written over 4 dozen articles on Benghazi. Here's what I want to know: what do you get when you combine the criminality of Iran-Contra, the layered cover-ups of Watergate by the highest levels of our government, the role of the CIA in the failed Bay of Pigs coup attempt against Castro, and the presidential finger wagging to an American audience about the Clinton-Lewinsky affair. Well, you get a very small, a very tiny glimpse into the run-up, the attacks, and the continued cover-up of Benghazi. For all of the events related to Benghazi represent an operation much larger in scope and treachery than the combined sum of the previous. Now, before we bring Sheila on, I just want to say that I've extensively written about Benghazi, and I want to thank W, of course, who appeared on Friday night. And let me digress a moment here to mention W, our intelligence insider, the real James Bond, as I call him. I got a lot of emails saying, wow, it was a great program. And then I got a couple of emails saying, well, I turned it off after the first hour because I didn't like the direction it was going. One email in particular, a female wrote to me, a woman wrote to me, and she said, I turned it off at 10:30, which is actually 2.5 hours into the program. And I said, you missed the best part. She turned it off for the same reason, that she didn't feel it was going in the right direction. I said, well, you missed the last 30 minutes of it. Had you listened to the last 30 minutes of it, I think many of your questions would have been answered. Actually, I got 3 different emails like this, 2 women and one gentleman. And the one who I wrote back to, I wrote back to 2, and the one responded back, and she said, let me apologize for not listening to the entire interview because the last half hour really put things together for me. But anyway, W has been the source of much of the information about Benghazi and about the truth behind Benghazi. But note that exposing the truth about Benghazi will result in the absolute complete disclosure of the largest central logistics, control, and coordination center for weapons, arms, and manpower in violation of U.S. and international law at the highest levels of our government, as well as with some of our allies. Now, it would be an admission that the criminal cabal of globalists holding key positions within our government, involving both sides of the political spectrum, had, and they still have, the blood of not just 4 Americans, including that of 1 U.S. ambassador, but over 250,000 men, women, and children on their hands. That is the current and best estimate of the death count in Syria, for it is Syria where the weapons and manpower were ultimately destined and continue to be. Folks, remember that. We do have a lot of Benghazi news that we're facing, or that's coming out. And isn't it interesting? The things that you're hearing right now is the information that you heard, or that we had right after this happened back in September of 2012. And now this is just coming to the forefront. And folks, you've got to be careful of which sources you trust on this. Just be very careful. We had Robert Tosh Plumley on. Folks, if you didn't hear last Wednesday's program with Robert Tosh Plumley and W, wow. That was a history-making episode, to be sure. You talk about the field operative, a CIA field operative, facing not only marginalization and vilification because of his involvement, or his knowledge, I should say. Not involvement, but knowledge in of Benghazi. But he's asking questions that are rocking Washington. And I got to tell you that they're going after him to find out who his sources are. And they're going after everyone around him as well. So, folks, keep Robert Tosh Plumley in your prayers, as well as W. And of course, we could use a prayer or two once in a while. Thank you so much for that. But, Joe, did you get all hooked up now? Yeah,
we're back in business, ready to go. And with us, we have the host of the Weekend Vigilante, Sheila Zielinski. She has one of the fastest-growing shows in the new media. It is on at 6 o'clock right here on Blog Talk Radio. And she's had many guests on as well as W, Steve Quayle, Pastor Langford, I believe, and many others, similar guests, same guests that we've had on our show. The show that she does, Weekend Vigilante, is absolutely wonderful. It does sort of what we try to do and look at the world and the news through the Christian perspective.
But by far, she's a heck of a lot better looking than you and I could ever wish to be, right?
Absolutely. Sheila, are you with us?
I am, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Doug and Joe.
Well, thank you. You've got a melodious voice, and we really appreciate you having us, on our program. No, we appreciate you being on our program. You do a fantastic job, Sheila. I was listening to a couple of your programs. The last one with Gerald Celente. Wow, very interesting program indeed.
Yeah, he's actually he's a fun guy. He's kind of he doesn't mince words. He's kind of I always call him the Chuck Norris of trends forecasting. He's fun. And I had John B. Wells on Thursday along with V and W. Of course, that was a really hard-hitting lineup. So, it's a very, it's a similar format to what you guys do. And, of course, again, we've got a lot going on at every level here, and, we can hardly keep up with the headlines, really. But, it's just a pleasure to come on another show because, really, we are sort of under the underpinning of really the new media. Forget the alternative media. We really are the new media. We know that MSNBC and, as I call CNN, Clown News Network are just plummeting in their ratings. They're tanking, and people are sick of the bought and paid for, lamestream media just churning out the lies. And I don't just talk the talk. I actually walk the walk. I got rid of TV, months ago, Doug and Joe, because albeit I cannot stand the inundation of these virulent lies. So it was just one thing I felt was really important. Quit buying TV. And I love what John B. Wells said on my program on Thursday. Hey, folks, if you don't like GMO, stop buying them. If you don't like these Walmarts and these big banksters, don't deal with them. Go to a credit union or start one, or, don't like this constitutional absolute extirpation of all your rights. Quit electing sheriffs who don't support the Constitution. You don't like Common Core? Quit supporting it. There's so many things, Doug and Joe, that we can be doing if we really step back and sort of take a macro view. But again, we're getting kind of pummeled 6 ways to Sunday, so it's hard to know where even to start, I think, for most people.
Well, that was the question right before the show. Joe and I were talking, and we were saying, well, where do we start? And when you come on, we were saying, well, what should we ask Sheila about first? And then what should we ask her about, and we went down a list of topics. And by the time we got done, it was a long list and almost depressing. In the sense that here we are smack dab in the middle of perhaps one of the worst economic crises the world has ever seen. It's a global crisis, to me anyway, and people aren't really getting that. We're in a constitutional crisis, and people don't see that. I had a meeting earlier this afternoon with my health insurance carrier, who's canceling me at the end of next month because of the laws with respect to the Affordable Care Act. And I sat at the desk across from her, and I said, I will. Sorry, but I'm not going to be involved in any way, shape, or form of anything that has to do with the marketplace or the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare or whatever you people call it. And so that limited my options. But you're right. You've got to start by saying, don't buy this, or you've got to make a difference. We have to make a difference. But anyway, with that, Sheila, what's on your radar? Where do you want to start? Because I've been meaning to. You were so gracious to have us on your program back February 27th of this year, and I want to thank you for that.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure. We talked, of course, about the banksters just deciding to leap from windows, and it's really funny because it is a good place to start, and I think that is kind of the pinnacle of what's going on. There's so many crazy headlines, and let's just jump into some of these headlines, Doug, because I think they're playing out like a bad Twilight Zone episode here. I was actually chuckling yesterday because I was kind of perusing the headlines. I'm thinking, listen to this. I mean, this really does sound like, forget a dystopic novel from the 40s. Some of this stuff sounds like, George Orwell's 1984 is playing out right like a newspaper. But, here's some headlines. Justice Department launches covert sanctions against gun owners. That's May 1st. Lefties target Christian homophobes in the NBA. Mother targeted because she homeschools her son. House Democrat, all criticism of Obama is now straight-up racism. Supreme Court refuses to uphold the Constitution and allows indefinite detention. Police can now search your cell phone without a warrant. Pennsylvania State Supreme Court says that you no longer need a warrant to search vehicles. Man arrested for criticizing Islam. Supreme Court refuses challenges to NDAA. Scientists discover proof that humanity is getting dumber, smaller, and weaker. The White House wants Chinese-style ID system for Internet users. This is just, I can't help but use the term that Steve Quayle uses is, we're seeing an all-out war in America on all fronts, Doug. Our culture, our heritage, our technology, our values, our beliefs, and I'm going to have to steal Steve's plundering and pillaging because we can only really use pirate terms here to describe what's unfolding. We've moved now from a soft, ambiguous tyranny to a more aggressive, full-out dictatorial, tyrannical imperialism. And think about this, people, thousands of unconstitutional regulations. Doug just talked about Benghazi. You've got presidential fiat, domestic spying, a draconian police state, IRS abuses, prosecutorial abuses, refusal to execute laws, changing laws. The list goes on, Doug and Joe, to the point of nausea. And I said before in a program, America wasn't the last bastion. It's the first and only bastion of hope, freedom, and liberty. And America actually, believe it or not, stood firm once as a liberty beacon for the world, the moral compass, the sheriff in town, if you will. And people across the world actually watch our Westerns. And the United States was envied by the world for a democratic constitutional republic, but not only that, it was like none in the world. It had a Christian nation with deep roots in biblical principles, yet somehow we've absolutely lost our ability to be that moral compass. And in addition, we've allowed ourselves to be taken over from the inside by this sociopathic, unscrupulous, out-of-control, rogue government gone. The sociopaths hell-bent on destroying this once great country. And so that is the start, because I was shocked yesterday when I read that a major Christian conference is now pushing mysticism. It is just full-out sci-fi, isn't it, really, here, folks?
Yes, there is. And with all that you listed in the news and what you listed as problems with our society and our country, do you see any solution or any way we could even retain or even get back?
Like I said to John Wells, I said, John, I don't know if it's our GMO food or fluoridation and chemicals in our water or the big farm or the chemtrails or all of it combined, but let's face it here, because we, aside from maybe a very tiny amount of people, have got a very dumbed-down, sort of zombified public walking around in this complete dystopic trance, acquiescing to this thing, and their shoulder shrugging while Rome burns around us. And, it's not bad enough, the stuff I just talked about, but then we've got sort of coterminous to that, we've got this outright attack on the family, our kids, our marriages, our education, Common Core. Are you kidding me? We've got this vehemently, morally bankrupt society. Don't believe me, look at a primetime TV lineup or go walk through a big box store of books. 50 Shades of Mind-Numbing Filters. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah on steroids. And I think as you step back and you take a macro view here, Joe and Doug, you think, well, what is it going to take, number one, to snap people out of their trance? Number two, what is it going to take our country back? I guess that's the more prevalent question that I would like to pose, because, it's not just the fact that now that Doug and Joe and Sheila and the Dave Hodges and the Ben Swans now, if they pass this newest legislation, we are now written off as these rogue dissidents, because now, of course, as you know, it's before Congress. Obama wants a kill switch. And it's not just a kill switch. It's the SOPAs and the CISPAs and all these sci-fi net neutrality bills that are going to shut us down. So it's like, we don't like weekendvigilante.com or homelandsecurityus.com. Let's just shut these guys down, or let's just make their pages really slow. There's so many things going on here, fellas. That's the thing. Where do you start? What are the solutions? And I think one of the solutions I think we have to remember first and foremost is, I don't know how many of your listeners, I'm not sure how many listeners are actually praying Spirit-filled Christians, but I do know that is where it starts. I really believe that we got to get back to the basics of prayer, because our nation's in a lot of trouble, and if we don't step up as a Christian nation, we're in massive trouble here, Joe and Doug.
A couple of things, Sheila. I'll be damned if I'm going to be shut up by anybody, and especially by this rogue government. Now, if that means that I'll have to invest in a bullhorn or something similar, I'm going to do that, or perhaps something, in another venue, I'll do that. But the way I look at things right now, and Steve Quayle says it so well. There are no spiritual, no political solutions to spiritual problems, and we're inundated with spiritual problems here as a nation. You see it. I'm sure you see it, obviously. But by the way, folks, I want to mention this because I think this is pretty cool. Sheila's going to be appearing at the Whitestone Remnant Conference in Bozeman at the end of this month. We're going to be able to meet her in person. So those of you who are going, look forward to meeting Sheila there. She's a rock star, so that's going to be fun. But,
I've been hailed recently. You'll find this funny. They used to call me Alex+Jones in a dress, and now I guess I'm Steve Quayle in a skirt. And Steve said, well, that's a really frightening image. But, it's funny. I think I'm probably one of the only females that is out there, screaming from the rooftops. And it's really interesting because, as I look around, I say to people all the time, in fact, it was so interesting this morning. I'm talking to this friend of mine, and she's talking about her banking, and I said, why are you banking with this system? You hear my show. I'm calling her on it. I said, I hate to hurt your feelings here, but you are part of the problem. You're running off to Walmart. You're going to do your banking at Citibank. I said, you've got your latest iPhone gadget. Everybody is just absolutely, it's like they don't walk, they believe it. Like they believe in GMOs and chemtrails, and they believe in this and that, but they're still, plunking away through the television channels, and they're still doing their sort of dystopic trance thing. And that's where I think fundamentally we have to have a huge, and I hate to call this, but I will anyway, a quantum shift here in people's behaviors. Because like I said, if you don't like the GMO, quit buying them. You don't like, what Walmart stands for, quit going there. Well, it's cheap. And I don't want to hear any excuses from people, because until we get with the program, we're still going to continue to absolutely spiral out of control. And take a little chew on it, folks. And how does it tasting? You liking the Kool-Aid yet? Because I'm telling you, think it's bad now, Doug. It is going to get so unrecognizable pretty soon if people don't snap out of their trance and actually do something. It's one thing to listen to the alternative news, the new media, but it's one thing to take action. And there's a little, ironically, it's Walt Disney, of course it is, but it's funny because there's this little cartoon called A Bug's Life, and there's a line out of it I think is so profound. And this leader says, it's a cricket or whatever it is, and he goes, you let one ant stand up to us, then they might all stand up. These puny little ants outnumber us by 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. And this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with about 568 people against, how many people are there in North America? There's 331 million in the States. There's 30 million. So we're dealing with about 370 million people in North America alone. And we're going to let this little group of clandestine oligarchs call the shots? Is that what's happening? I can't wrap my head around it, Doug and Joe.
Well, and what they've done, it's even worse than that. They've divided Americans, from the stupid to even the people who consider themselves awake, along so many lines. Even just reading a story here today about the Cinco de Mayo, and there's some commotion as some 18 to 20 protesters brought American flags to protest outside of a high school that refused to let students in wearing American flag T-shirts during Cinco de Mayo. You have them you have the protesters being called racist by Twitter followers and other people for carrying the American flag to the protest and waving it around. I mean, this country's a nation divided against itself the people all for themselves, divided along anything that they can think of, and we need to find a way to bridge the gap that would unite people instead of continue to divide them.
Well, I think the piece in that is when you've got such a shift, you've got all this diversity, you've got a shift of such political correctness at every level, and that is what's killing us, is political correctness. When patriots are touted as terrorists, or anybody that supports the Constitution now is labeled as a dissident or a rebel, or, they need to be carted off and locked up under NDAA. I mean, crazy's crazy no matter how you slice it. And that's what I believe is we have absolutely, everything's upside down now. I mean, we're systematically every single day dehumanized. We're being taught to love our servitude. Well, I don't even think they're so clandestine anymore. These oligarchs usurp our freedoms. Because let's face it, whether you go to the TSA or anywhere else, it's just a full spectrum dominance over every area of our lives. You better sit down, shut up, do what you're told, and don't you dare question your government or your administration, or then, of course, like we just talked about, you're a terrorist. And look around, a militarized police, body scanners, citizen spies, sound cannons, drones, stage terror, massive psyops, cameras on every street corner. I mean, it's Big Brother meets draconian police state. And come on, America, people can no longer claim ignorance on the NSA surveillance grid here. We got a detailed, multi-dimensional image of our daily lives being built with this system. You can't, I mean, it's unparalleled, Doug and Joe. Everything from our daily travel routes to our eating habits are traceable. I mean, like I said, George Orwell, it's I think what troubles me the most right now is that it's like they're scared. They're running scared. So it's, Pastor Langford said the word that I think of too right now is acceleration. And Tom Horn said something profound on my show one time. He said, he said, if my parents ever walked into a church nowadays, these mega churches, they'd try to cast demons out of it. He said, the church is unrecognizable. Our country is unrecognizable. If people were to come like Back to the Future and the DeLorean, and they came from, say, the 1970s to now, how would people react, do you think, Doug and Joe? I mean, it's unrecognizable, and you think it's bad now, folks. Keep shrugging your shoulders to what it's, have a little chew of what the Soviet Union was like, or the Warsaw Ghetto, or worse, Auschwitz, because that's what's coming.
It's interesting you asked that. My mom passed away back in 1978. And I often wonder, and she was active in her church, and she was a Roman Catholic, a very staunch Roman Catholic, and friends with the Sisters of Mercy, and she would have them over at the house, and there was this level of respect. Now, that's not to say anything about Catholicism or anything, but the question you just asked, I often wonder if she were to be standing here today, or to go into a church today, or to be looking around today, I wonder what she would think, given the changes that we have seen, the changes we've undergone in the last 35 years, or 36 years as it stands. But interesting question. Sheila, let me make a left turn here, if I may. After I had put up on our website that you were going to be on tonight, I had a couple of emails asking me for your history, basically, where you came from, knowing that having looked at the lineup of guests very similar to ours, people know our history. They don't know yours. When were you always aware that something was wrong, or did something happen in your life to kind of wake you up to your level of knowledge today? I mean, tell us a little bit about yourself, I guess, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all. Well, interestingly, when I was 12 years old, going back a long time ago, when I was 12, I got a copy of a book from my uncle, and it was called When Your Money Fails. And it was a really interesting book, and I since actually have found a copy of that book. And so I sort of had that in my data bank as a younger child. I like to read a lot. And so, of course, fast forward years later, and I was very high up in regulatory affairs with 3 different ministries of environment, energy, and there was a couple of things that started really disturbing me about 10 years ago when it came to, the sort of the green agenda, this sort of environmental, this pantheistic occult, or death cult, I call it, that's really being pumped on the people. And I thought, it's really interesting. These people are pushing this sustainability, and I really, really had a sense of Agenda 21 coming fast and furious. And then springboarding from that, I actually was asked to go to the Kyoto Protocol Accord, and that is where I met the wonderful Dr. Tim Ball, who had just written a book called The Slaying the Sky Dragon, and he was exposing Al Gore for the huckster that he did in that movie. And then, of course, a few years later, my mother was given a vaccination, and 24 hours later, she was laying on the ground, couldn't move her body from the neck down. And I also, so aside from the whole environmental piece, I started really looking into vaccinations. My mom still actually lives in an institution for 24-hour care. That happened when she was 58 years old, just a couple of years ago, and I was pretty stunned at the immense cover-up the doctors and the big pharma companies did with this Tamiflu vaccination. The fact that there's so many things you're not, being told on the 6 o'clock news. So I started a PhD 3 years ago. I wrote one book called Red Flag. I co-authored another book with Dr. Tim Ball called Cool It, Al Gore. And there's a couple of projects I'm working on now, and that's sort of a little overview. And, of course, it was really interesting how I got into radio. I was actually asked by Special Forces to co-host a show 2.5 years ago, which sort of, I was dumped at the last minute off it because he couldn't do it, and I sort of had to take over the show. It's just, here's the mic, go for it. Never done a show. And I just sort of springboarded from there. So, yeah, that's a little bit of a cold note snapshot of how I got into this.
Wow. Okay. And when 9/11 happened, and I'm not sure where in the process, where in your life you were on 9/11 of 2001, but when the attacks happened, did you see them for what they were, or did you see them as perhaps being something wrong with them, or did you? Yeah,
I really did see something wrong there, because what struck me very odd that day is the fact that there was so many layers of things that struck me funny. It struck me as, how does a plane just fly into airspace? And, that's the first thing that just struck me as very odd, because I had known people in the aviation industry that, it's just like this Malaysian airliner. I've talked to lots of Boeing engineers, and like they say, a plane just doesn't disappear. In fact, no plane flies into any uncharted airspace. So there was a lot of things going on for me. Also the fact that, they had talked years ago about a one world monetary tower. I thought that was a real pinnacle, a beacon, if you will, some kind of symbolic representation of the money system, the one world tower, as it's called. And all these things sort of were churning around in my head at the time, and I knew there was something very, very disturbing, because here's the thing with Christians. Luckily, we have the Holy Spirit discernment, and there's always things, I call it my spider senses are tingling. I know when I can call BS on something pretty quickly. And so, there was something that just didn't resonate intrinsically in my guts about all that. It's the same thing that President Kennedy was around, but I wasn't born until the 70s, but I know that there was something, as I read a lot of that when I was younger, in my teens, I knew there was something very wrong about the whole JFK assassination. So there was many layers of things that felt similar to that. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So, wow. Okay. Not that I thought you were a lot older, but boy, you could be my daughter then. Okay.
Well, some days I feel like I'm 70, so we're good, Doug.
Well, it's I looked at, and I remember, well, one of my first memories, by the way, and I'll just throw this out there, as a very young child, was the JFK assassination. I remember watching that over and over again, and then getting for Christmas, my mother had purchased I mean, actually, I wanted this for Christmas. If you can imagine this young child getting the Warren Commission report as a Christmas gift and being excited about it. Okay, that was me, the nerdy kid. But anyway, but it's a fascinating backstory to you. You seem like you're so far ahead of the curve on just about everything. What do you see right now, Sheila? And let's start with the meat here. I guess the meat of the program. What do you see right now as being the most important issue, pressing issue of the day? And I know that sounds like a very trite question, a question that, it's easy to ask, but it's an important one, I think. Of all the things going on, what's on your radar the most?
Well, again, it's such a loaded question because, again, we are getting absolutely fervently pummeled 6 ways to Sunday. And, I mean, I guess where I think about is this, when I was a kid, I really liked Westerns, and I sort of think, the spirit of the Texas Ranger, they kept on coming and, they had grit and backbone. And, I was really like John Wayne and like Clint Eastwood, and I had a father kind of like that. In fact, my father's still alive. He's 64, and he's kind of a John Wayne meets Clint Eastwood, and, he's kind of a no-nonsense kind of a cowboy type. And, I thought about this unscrupulous huckster Harry Reid and his BLM minions at this, it's not just, of course, we know about Agenda 21 or this, this ENN Energy group grab, but I think what represented something that is so traditionally Americana is that sort of last rancher standing. We all know they've ran off those 53 other families out of that area. But Bundy reminded me of that spirit of that Texas Rangers, because let's face it, when you got a sniper nest pointing at you and these paramilitary thugs announcing that they're going to use lethal force, what happened that weekend to me was martial law, just complete tyrannical thuggery, yet the talking heads at Clown News Network and others calling those peaceful cowboys and militia terrorists. Of course, we know that we're getting labeled as terrorists if we don't agree with anything. But here's the thing, and Harry with his little smug comments, this is not over. Here's the thing, Doug and Joe, you've got all these alphabet soup dictatorial huckster agencies, in collusion with the government. You got this, again, full-on draconian militarized police preparing the police and military for war against the citizenry. And I just talked about the system tells us what to do, how high to jump. But to the discerning eye, I think these flashpoints of tyranny are everywhere. V talks about sort of the economic flashpoints, but when you've got these systems threatening to push the nation into open revolt, and that standoff to me between the Bundy Ranch and the BLM feds is a visceral example of growing discontent over this expanding federal government, and it's kind of this perfect storm illustration of an arbitrary and incompetent federal government running roughshod over its citizens, and that is the piece, I guess, that really stands out to me. We know these abuses have occurred over many decades and probably started even before Nazi Germany, but it's really kind of got a focused intent lately. You see this centralization of power and this steady erosion of your personal wealth, your liberty. All these abuses and their suppressions continue, but here's the thing. I think Americans are going to have to face a choice between submitting or standing like the Bundys. And I don't think those guys were prepared. They're all about shoving women's face in the ground and tasering people and, kicking dogs around and just being thugs. But I think this is just the beginning of these type of flashpoints because I think they're beta testing. I think the globalists want a war against the citizens. And, so that's what I see. There's this real beta testing going on a lot of levels. Just today, Citibank, their whole online system is down, and I couldn't help but chuckle about something V said on Thursday, and you flash forward not even 3 days later. But it's like all these headlines are coming at us fast and furious. Everything's getting ramped up. And let's face it, Doug and Joe, you guys are very much, you have your thumb in the pulse of what's going on. And we both do a lot of research on, and we kind of connect all the dots. But here's the problem. It's one thing to sit and talk, but again, there has to be some kind of action. And number one, I think it starts with what we can do at a grassroots level in our own community. And that's really important, I think. And prayer and fasting, that's huge to me. Because, again, we're not fighting flesh and blood here. Satan's ramping things up. Every day you can, look around and it's, it's whether it's Ezekiel or Revelation. I mean, everything is unfolding biblically. It's like a nature hike through the Book of Revelation every day. And we know that the prophetic scripture is just coming to life. I mean, even somebody with the most virulent case of normalcy bias out there, Doug and Joe, even some atheist, I mean, if they are that stupid that they don't see that the Bible's unfolding, there's something wrong with their, there's something seriously wrong there. You can no longer just claim ignorance, I don't think.
No, you're absolutely right. And there is a lack of individual critical thinking. There's just no motivation when it comes to people finding things out for themselves. It seems that they'd rather listen to 10 other men or women's opinions about a certain issue or scripture or interpretation of a scripture rather than read the Bible and pray for the revelation on for themselves. And that's a huge issue, and that's why I think the churches are where they are today, being so far gone. It's hard to find a church that will even speak the truth.
Yeah.
Well, you're right. And as I think about 2 Timothy 3:2 and 5, if you look at that scripture, that's exactly what we're seeing on every level. Men, it says, shall become lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, no natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those who are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure, having no form of godliness but denying the power thereof. I mean, and that's really what we're seeing. Because, again, you got the Rick Warrens off doing their Chrislam thing, and you got Kenneth Copeland over here going for a one-world religion. You got Joel Osteen, who won't talk about anything. I don't really preach where I don't feel comfortable. Well, how about you start with preaching the Bible there, Joel? There's a lot of things going on here, and I think that is the problem, too, is we've got such a fabric, a tapestry of complete deception woven into the church today. That's a part of the problem, too. I mean, people have got to, get back to the basics here. I mean, a watered-down gospel to me is no gospel at all. And we really have this numbed and dumbed church that is all for the, you take the regulations, you take the rules. We don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about Jesus because we might offend somebody. Are you kidding me? Is that really where we're at here, folks?
Isn't that something? And when we do talk about the scripture, it amazes me, Sheila. And I don't know if you've I'm sure you've run into this on your program, but there are many people. It seems to me that now. Please feel free to correct me if you think if I'm looking at this improperly. I would welcome any correction. Does it seem to you, as it does to me, that people are very fragile in their faith today? Or is that a misperception that I have?
No, I don't think that's a misperception at all. In fact, I think you're right dead on the money. And here's the funny thing, fragile is a really interesting word because I think this is, as you were talking, it reminded me of Elijah in the showdown of the prophets of Baal when he said, how long will you falter between two opinions? Because you have to remember at the time Ahab and his wonderful wife there, that's just a joke, I threw that in, was really promoting Baal worship. And so, here you've got this prophet saying, listen, you can't have one foot in the world and one foot in the things of God. So there is kind of a fragility, but there's also, look what's going on. There's so much mysticism and, this Guy 11 occultic death worship camp of Al Gore and his minions are pushing this very pantheistic pagan, let's worship trees, rocks, sustainability. It's just absolutely mind-numbing that all these churches are, we've got the Trilateral Commission big symbol outside the church and the recycling bin, and we better recycle, we better bow down to Mother Gaia. But it's not just environmentalism has urged itself in and infused its tentacles into the church now. It's also that, think about it. I get hammered so hard daily. Some of my YouTube videos, the comments are, you are a tinfoil hat nut job lady. You're way out there. I get hammered really hard, and I think, I'm the tinfoil nut job or the kook. It's not me saying this stuff like Prince Philip. I'd like to come back as a killer virus to, depopulate the earth because humans are a virus. humans are the very blight of the earth. They're a cancer. I mean, we could go on and on. I could make up just a book of quotes from these guys. You know, and you got Ted Turner and Bill Gates out there. Well, we got too many people using too much stuff. You know, everybody's just buying everything hook, line, and sinker, and that's the part of this, that everything is woven right into the church. And now you've got new agey tentacles in the church as well. And you got Oprah. Oprah's a very dangerous woman out there telling people, listen, there's lots of ways to God. And so when you have this fusion of new aginess creeping and rearing its head up into the church, that's not okay. And that's, again, Daniel talked about it, Elijah talked about it, all the big, you know, the big power prophets talked about this. You do not serve two masters, and that's the problem. So fragility, that fragile state, yes, I agree with that, Doug.
It just seems to me that when we start talking about, on Friday we had our mutual friend W on, and we were talking about a very specific topic about DNA, the blood, and about what the Satanists believe. And I'll use the word Satanist to cover an array of people, an array of thoughts, the people who believe that they control things. And he was attempting to explain how these people think and what their belief system is. And it didn't offend a lot of people, but the people it did offend seemed to offend greatly. And we had raves about the show, great show. On the other hand, there were a couple of people who really took offense, and they struck me harder than those who praised the show, because I looked at that and I thought, no, wait a minute. If we can't have an intellectual discussion about what the enemy thinks, then it seems to me that that we are immature in our system of belief and in our faith, and by being immature in our faith, and then to me, we're not prepared for what's coming, and that to me is a very scary, very frightening thought for those people, on behalf of those people. Do you know what I mean? Did I explain that right? Or that's not kind of kooky?
Yeah, I think, people have to remember this. These Illuminati, very ancient Babylonian mystery banking families and these cartels, they're actually royal bloodlines, and there's 13 of them. And, there's some really good information out there. Here's the thing. These people take their Luciferian religions very serious. And, of course, Russ Dizdar is another one going to be at the conference. And Russ is very, very immersed, equipped, and very, very skilled in these areas of just how deep some of this more nefarious, sinister, Luciferian kinds of things work. And this is the frightening thing. They take their religion very serious. It's funny, that movie that Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise were in, I can't think of the name of the movie. I think it was called Eyes Wide Shut or something like that. Well, it's very interesting because the producer of that movie was killed halfway through the production of it. I don't know what happened, but it's funny that he was offed because they were also speaking in a very weird backwards form of Romanian, and they were doing I really think he got killed for exposing too much, and I found that very interesting, some of the things that were happening to those people and some of the, producing. They didn't want that movie to come out. So there's a lot of things over and over and over that we see that these Illuminati kingpins, they're one thing in any Freemasonry or Illuminati, they value one thing, and that is secrecy. And that is why these secret societies and these very deeply immersed kingpins, they don't want people discovering what these guys are doing out at the Bohemian Groves and, these sacrificial care. I mean, these are some very disturbing things that we're talking about. Blood sacrifices, very Luciferian. This is this stuff that only bad dreams are made of, but it's very real. And again, people know, Doug, that we're dealing with good and evil here. Otherwise, how does any of this make sense to anyone if we're not dealing with just plain evil versus good here?
You're exactly right, and sadly, 95% of the people out there, from what I see at least, don't even recognize that there is evil out there or good or either one. They just chalk it up to, human behavior, and we see how society's been manipulated, and we often say on the show how, little shiny trinkets in sports will make a person disconnect from the political and true nature of what's going on in the world. And just on the radio today, I was listening to a owner of a bigger media organization. I think it was some kind of internet organization that did news, and they said that aside from weather, their biggest response was to sports. And we see that all the time. People can memorize the names of every person on their favorite sports team, no matter which sport you're talking about, yet they don't know the name of the vice president. It just goes to, what they did back in Rome and the gladiators and the Colosseums, the bread and circus. And that's what we have today, only on a much grander scale, and much more is at stake, it seems.
Well, and then you on top of that, something that to me is right out of, this isn't even out of a Mary Shelley Frankenstein or a Gene Roddenberry film. This is real life sci-fi that's also unfolding now, is, this whole period when human evolution's now unfolding that's controlled. So in other words, now, you've got this transhumanism theme everywhere. You can just go to the movie screen and you can see old Johnny Depp as, the poster boy for transhumanism, Ray Kurzweil, in theaters now because, Joe and Doug were, God just didn't quite do a good enough job. We're too fat, dumb, slow, and God knows what else. So we better just get a new vehicle for this brain. Let's, upload our brains into these new avatars starting in 2014. And people can actually go to this website, 2045, the number, 2045.com, and look at this UN's sci-fi agenda to start having people upload their brains into these avatars very quickly. So we're looking at, and go grab a recent copy of the Time magazine headline on the front pages, 2045, the year that man becomes immortal. We are talking about post-humanism. Just try to chew that for a minute. And the elites believe that this will happen. All this technological progress that is continuing to be constant on making this, a new body for the human being. So we're incrementally moving the human mind into these more futuristic vehicles, not bodies, vehicles. First a humanoid robot controlled entirely by the human brain, by some kind of brain-machine interface, and then a conscious human brain is going to be transplanted or uploaded, maybe is a better word, into a computer. And DARPA's funding these human augmentation projects, for lack of a better word, all around the world. And it's in the name of improving performance in humans. Well, that's really nice. Everything from tapping the conscious mind to augmenting cognition. So think about that for a sec. Again, God's creation doesn't quite cut it. And it's amazing, and it remarkably echoes the same lie Satan peddled to Eve in the garden. You will become like God. We're just kind of right back to that, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, as a matter of fact. It all comes back to that in the end, or in the beginning, shall we say. It's amazing. Sheila, I've got probably a page in terms of emails as they would arrive. I've got about a page, meaning about probably 4 dozen questions from listeners already for you, very specific questions. Before we get too far into this, and as we're approaching the top of the hour break, if you can tell our listeners, how often are you on, where can they find you, and a little bit about your program.
Sure. Well, my program is The Weekend Vigilante, and, of course, my website's it's weekendvigilante.com, and, of course, I'm on Twitter and Facebook. I do a 3-hour program once a week is what my format has been, but I'm currently, as of this week, a free agent, so looking for a new home, and we'll see how that goes. I'm kind of, I think, set back. I'm going to do an interview with Chris Putnam this week, and then I think I'm going to take a little bit of a break until the conference, and then regroup and come out both arms swinging in probably June. Yeah, so that answers that.
That's interesting. I know you and I spoke off air last week. I had the something just told me to give you a call, and it was an interesting day, an interesting prompting I had to call you. Not having talked with you since February, I think it was, when we were on your program, and something just said, talk to Sheila. And it's to me, I've been getting a lot of requests to have to somehow get the people such as yourself and ourselves, the what others would call the truth tellers, without the money behind them, without the big backing behind them. And goodness knows, we don't have, we're not I mean, we're certainly not, we don't have money behind us to do what we do. But I've gotten a lot of requests and people saying, team up, and you folks, including you, would be a formidable force in getting the truth out there in some way, shape, or form. But somehow find an outlet to team up and to share in the. I mean, it would just be a fantastic. I don't know. It just seems to me it would be fantastic. What do you think about that? I mean, if there's some way we could do that.
Well, here, I absolutely think something like that is very, that's very interesting. And, of course, I support that 100%. And, again, you have to remember, it's really funny. Recently, I lost one of my sponsors, and he phoned me up one day, and he said, listen, love your show. You're very intelligent. You're really good at putting on, you got a great audience. You got the numbers. But, can you lighten up on the God talk and the Jesus stuff a little bit? So I flat out just said, no, not an option, and I'll talk about what I want, and I'm not going to have, I'm going to have the autonomy to do what I want. I'm not going to play an ad every 5 seconds. And, so there were some definite things that I wanted to do, and I wasn't going to let anybody infringe upon how I organize a format of my show. And so that has actually really cost me. Now, it's interesting when you look at the MSNBCs and you look at even Glenn Beck, is a good example of another, he might not be considered mainstream, but he's certainly got the dollars that have, backed him. And there's a lot of different people out there that are in it for the money. And, of course, I think everybody knows, they can just sense that this isn't about the money. This is, in fact, there hasn't been any money in this venture for me personally. But here's the thing it is about. It really is about being a truth teller, and you just said the word. It's giving your audience a really good, solid show and looking at what you're not being told in the 6 o'clock news. And I think, again, whether it's, cognitive dissonance or just this virulent, complete trance, I don't know what it is, but I think the nice thing about it is, Doug, that people are starting to wake up. And that is something I've been waiting. I've been waiting 5 years for people to start snapping out of their trance. And that is very exciting because people all over the world are waking up. And again, it's not about the money, but, teaming up to be a force that, I think it would be a very, like you just said, a formidable foe, merging forces, combining forces, and doing a powerhouse show. I see that in the future as, competing with somebody like a CNN. We're not necessarily backed with that kind of money, but who says we can't be at some point too? God, we serve a big God, so I'm not too worried about it.
Amen to that. And Sheila, we're up against the top of the hour break. We're going to take that break now. And if you don't mind, when we come back, we could throw a couple listener phone call questions in there.
Yeah, you seem to have, I got to tell you, Sheila, you seem to have a lot of people who either want to talk with you or ask you directly. 14, we're joined by our guest, Sheila Zielinski. Her website is weekendvigilante.com, and her show, The Weekend Vigilante, on Blog Talk Radio. She's got an interview coming up with Chris Putnam on Thursday. Then she said she'll be taking a short break. She'll be joining us at the Whitestone Remnant Conference in Montana, which will be fantastic. It'll be nice to meet her. And Sheila, you have a co-host now. Dr. Tim Ball.
Yeah, Dr. Tim Ball. How is it working with Dr. Tim Ball and having him as a co-host?
Yeah, Dr. Ball does he does co-host with me. I'm fairly independent, but occasionally I will bring him on because, of course, one of my passions has really been, and of course, he wrote this amazing book. If you Google it in Amazon, in fact, if you go to my website and click on the bio, you can see my bio, and then Tim, occasionally, again, he does come on and co-host, and he was really instrumental in bringing down Al Gore with this group of 30,000 scientists that actually sued him over this sci-fi. And, oh, by the way, he's churning out another Bigger, Better Lies and another Inconvenient Truth Part 2 now. So that'll be wonderful there with this unscrupulous charlatan huckster that's still peddling the global. It's not global warming anymore. It's climate crises now. It was climate change and it was something else, and then it was global warming, and now it's the climate crisis. So, all the sea levels are rising, going to flood us out next Tuesday, and, all the polar bears are drowning. And I mean, it was such an unscrupulous thing they were doing. So really, because of what I had studied environmentally, I really teamed up with Tim, and occasionally he does come on and co-host when we bring on, somebody like a Michael Kaufman, a Brian Sussman, a Chris Horner who wrote Red Hot Lies, a lot of these weather people, a lot of the, the real scientists, because Tim has actually 2 PhDs, and one is atmospheric climatology, and he's brilliant, got a great book out. If you click on his name on the website, it's Climate Corruption, and really how they've politicized biofuels as a they've taken this whole the cap and trade, the whole carbon agenda, and they've really said basically that Joe and Doug, save the planet, kill yourself, because really that's what it's really about. It's really a very sinister eugenics plan here is what the bigger piece of all this is. And, like Bill says, Bill and Ted, we've got too many people using too much stuff, so we have to depopulate. And that's really, that's where Tim comes in, because he was really involved with this group that sued these guys. So, ClimateGate was a big scandalous thing. And love Tim, he's great. And he's like one of those, 75-year-old men that are the smartest men on the planet, one of those guys. So it's really, it's big shoes to co-host with someone like that.
Understood. Now, Carrie out of Montana, I had to get my glasses on. Carrie out of Montana asks, wants to know if you write any columns on a regular basis. She adds that you are so well-spoken and knowledgeable that she wants to know if you write any columns anywhere that are published on a regular basis. Well,
it's funny this girl asked this, because actually I have an article that's been picked up on both alex+Jones and Drudge, but it's actually under somebody else's name, which I find interesting. So somebody kind of has been churning out some of the stuff that I've been writing. Occasionally I do write a blog or two, and of course, I submit some things to the Liberty Beacon. Again, Doug, Canada Free Press. I've submitted different things around. So do I kind of have an everyday blog? Not so much, but I think I've got a lot of requests to do that. So I think that's something that I need to start doing.
Okay, good. And David from Flint, Michigan wants to know let me be careful in paraphrasing this, because what he wants to know if you're either intimidated by the powers or perhaps just not getting enough support to continue your radio program, and if that's the case, perhaps there could be some way to help you. How can you best be helped? David from Flint, Michigan wants to know, because we all have to stick together in this, and you had mentioned something last week. I guess we're on the same time slot, or when you come on once a week, our time slots are overlapping. And to me, you're not a competitor. We're in this together. So anything that we can do to raise you up and to help you, man, I'm all for it, because you are one of the premier truth tellers and freedom fighters. So we have to stick together. But David from Flint wants to know how best he could help you, or listeners can help you, and I'll extend that to all listeners. So
yeah,
go ahead.
That's I really appreciate the question to your listener. It is an interesting question, again, because as sponsors take one look at our venues, and it's not politically correct to be really focusing on what we really are focused on. Let's face it, is really promoting salvation through Christ. I mean, that really is the pinnacle and the current of my message, certainly underpinning of what I really talk about, because it's one thing to talk about the New World Order and talk about this clandestine oligarch and, this Marxist megalomaniac minion and who's doing exactly what he's told. I mean, because Hitler promised hope and change, and we know Hitler's Germany had to join the SS and the Nazi Party, and he wanted everybody to join his new order, as he called it. And so it's the same slogans, the same, Solowinsky playbook, the same bowels of Marxism. It's all the same thing playing out here. It's just kind of being repackaged in a different way. So it's a good question. We don't exactly, let's face it, we're not going to get the big Walmart sponsors and the big kahunas there, so because of the venue that we do. So it's challenging. And I mean, if people are blessed by my programming, we all know that it's to be a cheerful giver, and I certainly am a big fan of tithing and offering and being a cheerful giver. And they can go to weekendvigilante.com and they can click on the donate button if they're interested in financial support. I love your audience. I love my own audience. It really is about them, and I always want to bring them a very cutting-edge, high-profile guests, the Gerald Salentes, the John B. Wells, the Steve Quayle. I've had Pastor Langford on lots, Tom Horn, V, all these guys. I mean, the same kind of people. Dr. Jim Garrow was on again last week. There's so many amazing people that we've brought on because we do want people to know the truth. And for what it's worth, if people feel blessed by the show, they can financially support. They can also email anything, whether it's content or something they want to talk about. We absolutely cater to our audience, and we love them. And it's really all about you guys. But my real heart is in healing and deliverance ministry. And I always say to everyone, if anybody ever wants prayer, that's hopefully where I'm see myself expanding a little bit. Into healing and prayer and a big, powerful deliverance ministry, and that's really where I see myself going in the future. And but radio is that's my passion too. It's to get that truth out there to people, because I've been kicked out of 4 churches, and I seek God's face in everything I do. I'm a firm believer in prayer, fasting, and being obedient is the big one to me. The big O is the most important thing, and I really believe if we're because the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added unto you. So that's his right way of doing things. If we are walking in the Holy Spirit and if we are seeking him, all this other stuff really doesn't matter. Yes, it's awful. Yes, it's horrible. But prayer is powerful. And I really have felt compelled to start a big, powerful prayer warrior team. And so I've been working on that the last few months. And if people want to get involved in that, they can too. And that's exciting. I think it's exciting that, our lifetime is coming to an end. We're coming into the end times. Things are ramping up. But, and I might have to take a guillotine or something and say, well, how many guillotines do they have now, the DHS? We might have to face that. But the bottom line is we know where our salvation is, and we know who's important here at the end of the day.
Amen. And well said. Thank you. And I guess, let's see. There's Mark, Ken, and John. Well, all 3 of them want to know if you're married, but we're not going to go there. God bless you, all 3 of you. Just saying what a beautiful young lady you are. And, of course, there's no disrespect intended by any of those, by the way. I just want to mention that. While we're here in a little bit of levity, folks, I've been getting reports. Excuse the intrusion, Sheila. I've been getting reports that our show from Friday is only showing 11 minutes in length. Joe, you and I spoke about this earlier.
Just real quick here. After the show, we got some communication saying that the show wasn't accessible or the show was only 11 minutes long. I downloaded it from both Blog Talk Radio and iTunes and had no problem, and did it on multiple computers on multiple days.
Well, what about the did you use Firefox or Explorer or both? Or
Firefox is what I used.
Okay, all right. So perhaps it could be a limitation of your browser, but folks, please, iTunes as well as BTR. I don't believe YouTube has the entire. Is it on YouTube or no?
I'm not sure. Sheila, you've never had these types of audio problems with your radio. topical.
Okay, well, you segued into it, so I'm just going to dive into this one. And I think this is actually really, really quite interesting timing, this little interruption, because here's the thing. V&W actually got completely cut off. They were at the last 20 minutes of the program. It was really heating up. They were about to launch into really some of the big pieces, and all of a sudden, bang, Blog Talk shut down. Steve Quayle comes on, all of a sudden there's weird clicking. Greg Evenson was on, and Steve, and it wasn't on my end either. And so there's nothing. Let's just face it, Blog Talk Radio is not the perfect venue, and that's why I think we have to be, fuse forces at some point and do something that is a little bit better of a venue, because again, they're always messing with us. And I always say, these guys are listening in all the time. There's always things happening like that, and I get mucked with a lot too. So I think it's time for a very different venue. And again, they got cut off completely. Not just you could phone back in again. Nobody could dial in. I couldn't even download the Blog Talk link to upload it to YouTube. But again, here's the frustrating part, Doug and Joe. This is kind of where I feel like a bit of a hypocrite sometimes, because, we love these little handy little iPhone 5s, and we love the computer and our iPads and the iPods and all these little pieces of technology. Oh, look, it's a phone, it's a GPS, it's a level, it's this, it's that. This is the problem, is we are so dependent on all these technologies. And I absolutely love what John B. Wells said on my program Thursday. He said, a guy phoned him and he said, hey, I'll just email you my number. And he said, why don't you just give me your number right now and I'll write it down? What a concept. And the guy's, no, I'll email it. He said, listen, I got to fire up my computer, log in my passwords, do this, do that. That'll take me about 15 minutes. Why don't you just give me the number and I'll write it down? And I thought, amazing. I think we have to go back to a more analog style of, a pre all this technology, because it is a cutting-edge sword. While we like the conveniences of all this stuff, we also have to realize, I saw this group of teenagers the other day. There was about 20 teenagers walking in a mall, and they were all staring down at their phones like this zombie apocalypse. And I thought, my God, is this what we've become?
Yeah, it's like all the smart technology is making us all dumber and more disconnected, and really, it's sad to see. I've been out to dinner and with people who spent the whole time looking at their phone like it was attached to their hand, and there is a thin line. And I know what you mean. We have to, we use Facebook, we use Twitter solely for the purposes of promoting our show. But, so many people are saying, you got to get out of Facebook, you got to get out of the social media. And I do agree. And that's the point that, we need to set up new networks, new systems on how we do things to make sure that they're done in a way that we can control and understand what's going on. Not having the NSA pose as Facebook for stealing 25 million users' information. That's the risks we run for using their systems.
Well, I'm always bound off Facebook for allegedly sending user requests, and I've never sent a friend request to anyone in the last 6 months. So I've had my YouTube account shut down. I restarted it about 5 months ago. It's amazing to me. These very things, these mediums of communication also, again, are, they're highly scrutinized. Like the surveillance grid. We all know that we're being data mined, tracked, hacked. So we're messed with. We know that. And is it the ideal system? No. Do I like Blog Talk Radio, the venue itself? No, not always. It's not the perfect solution, but I believe something else is coming. Like I said, maybe we'll have a Whitestone Remnant Radio coming up. Who knows? But I think there's some exciting things on the horizon for us in the new media, the real truth tellers.
I agree. I do agree. And I do see a change coming, a necessary change. Stephanie G. wants to know if you feel comfortable answering this, whether you have been threatened at all, aside from, because we've experienced the same thing. Advertisers, for example, coming to us and saying, well, you know what? You can make some good money by advertising our product. However, here are the parameters in which you must lie or must stay within, and you can't mention this or mention that on your show. as we deem it racist or we deem it hate speech. We've had that. But what Stephanie wants to know is, have you ever been threatened by what you've disclosed on your show?
Yeah, a few times. I've actually, it was interesting at the border. I was coming back into Canada through the United States at the border, and they scanned my passport 2 years ago, and they literally detained me at the passport office. Well, it was actually the Canadian side of the border, and they just said, you're not going anywhere, and we have reason to believe, suspect you in, some nefarious activity. And I said, what is this all about? And they said, well, we know who you are. And I thought, well, good, maybe you can enlighten me. And so it was a long day of about 9 hours being, grilled and questioned, and where are you from, and then the one guy actually mentioned something about radio, and he said, do you do a radio show? And he was talking about some things with, do you cover DHS and TSA, and do you talk about these kind of things? And actually they would not literally let me go anywhere, and they took me in a back room. It was pretty interesting scenario, but there was a couple of things that came up that I thought there's no way these people would know unless I was actually flagged. And so, I mean, aside from that, I mean, do I expect to be, maybe, take a short walk off a long plank at some time? I don't know what's going to happen with that. But, I mean, we do this. We take the territory, the good with the bad, right? If something happens, it happens. I would never commit suicide, but you never know with people. I mean, you've got a lot of people flailing themselves off buildings lately, so you never know what happens, right?
Exactly. Good point, by the way. Vic from North Carolina says, let's get into some meat here, meat in terms of topical matters. Any comments on the significant Russia-Chinese troop movement in the U.S. along the lines of what Dave Hodges has been saying? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, let's get into some meat. I guess that is excellent. I think about the takeover of this system at every level, and I kind of think of the Putin-Obama shuck and jive here with, Putin's kind of positioned himself to basically control much of the energy on the planet. He's really kind of put a stranglehold on Europe right now. He's threatening or positioning himself to revive the Cuban Missile Crisis, undermining, or actually replacing is a better word, of these free trade agreements. He's arming Latin American states with high-tech weaponry. I mean, and of course, everybody knows V's talked about the U.S. giving us a finger on the dollar, and, Gazprom just saying, yep, they're trading in euros now. So you've got China looking to replace the dollar with the yuan. You've got, this kind of playbook where it looks like Russia and China are collapsing our dollar. But the bigger piece around this, and kind of fusing in some of the things that Dave Hodges and I have talked about, the energy grid, this whole thing is a very, very disturbing setup to me it's kind of like an arena for complete subjugation here. I mean, I think that is kind of the playbook. And, I was talking to Doug and Joe, it was Jim Garrow on my program, and we were talking about that litmus test, the bombshell that he exposed, whether as far as leadership in the military, if the Pentagon and different kinds of high-level military guys would fire on U.S. citizens or not. And, if you get a chance, do listen to that show with Jim Garrow because, and I think you guys have had him on too, I mean, you've got, look at the November GridX drill. It's like what Dave Hodges said on my show a month back. Why are we allowing Chinese and Russians to participate in our simulated infrastructure takedown drills? And that's a very disturbing thing of its own. Now, springboard into this nuclear debacle with Obama. And last year, we know that this, a nuclear device went off in the deep ocean, and these two other nuclear devices went missing. And then Putin came out and confirmed it. And it's staggering how many nuclear protocols that Obama breached there. And what's even more unbelievable to me, Joe and Doug, is the layers of breaches here because, the signing off at every level that you have to do as a person, like, for example, Barry Soetoro and his, I call him the megalomaniac minion, and I'm sure that's not maybe the popular thing to say, but honest to God, this guy, there's so many violations here. He is the most duplicit and treasonous puppet ever in the history of anything. I mean, there's two generals and an admiral that said, no, we're not going to do this. They stopped it. Then the lamestream talking heads like CBS brought out this story. Nukes in hands of terrorists could result in bomb coming to Charlotte Harbor. I mean, do you find it interesting that the media keeps warning us of these EMPs all the time lately here? So now let's connect some other dots. So you got Putin doing his thing. You got how many Russian troops on our soil? At least 30 to 40,000. I mean, how does Congress willfully go along with that? Forget, swearing an oath to protect enemies, foreign and domestic. And it's just treasonous shenanigans all over the place. And then here's the final thing. So when you want to get into the meat of it, these Chinese building these special economic zones, and this is very similar to what happened on the Bundy showdown. You've got China collecting their debt here. So you got to look at these special economic zones, and one of them is what we're talking about, this ENN Energy Group with Harry the Minion Reid. You've got, again, China is collecting their debt. So essentially these agreements say, bottom line, Joe and Doug, that if U.S. defaults, China can go in boots on the ground and claim those natural resources. So, and they've already got them in South America and Africa. So essentially what I'm saying is certain economic zones are being run by Russia and China, and China's building these special economic zones. There's 5 of them in America, and Chinese, it's okay, forget collecting their debt, but what these agreements really say here is that China can go in and essentially take over. So it's boots on the ground, gives China full authority to claim the natural resources, and if China owns our debt and owns the Fed, and the Fed lends money to your bank and they lend it to you for your mortgage, does that then mean that China owns our home and our mortgages and our 401ks and our pension, and they already own our energy grid? What that really means, folks, is they could force starvation, compliance. They've already got, 250,000 Chinese troops on our soils. So don't you think we're being sold out here, Doug and Joe?
I do. And one of Sheila, perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of this to me, even more than the overt Chinese-Russian mutual aid or mutual boots on the ground here, is when I heard from V that J.P. Morgan Chase sold their Manhattan headquarters for, the fire sale price to the Chinese, including the vault space underground. It seems to me like this, if you take that scenario, which happened last year, and then look at what is taking place out at Bunkerville with respect to Harry Reid and the Chinese, it's almost as if we're witnessing this, what would you call it?
I call it a clever scheme to sell off below market value of valuable land, mineral, and water rights to communist China so that they can control everything in America. And just think back to, just as we see foreign countries owning our toll roads and our ports throughout the USA, Doug, they've turned our energy grid to foreign countries. It's like there's this plan in place to establish complete, Chinese ownership of everything, ports, factories, towns, energy, geothermal. So, that was what this big ENN showdown at the Bundy Ranch is all about, is, this little scrupulous, I'd like to smack him with a phone book. In fact, Harry Reid, you're on official call. If I see you, it's boxing gloves for us. But they're really, honestly, think about the George W. Bush administration when the Chinese were completely prohibited from buying interest in ports. But, of course, Obama and his administration reversed that. So think about the magnitude of the fact that we continue to borrow $1 trillion from the Chinese. The interest on that is mounting daily. And, already Janet Yellen, Bernanke 2.0 in a skirt there, Miss Keynesianism, she's already alluded to they're not ever going to, they're showing no end in sight of fixing these deficits. And again, you heard V just say we're not being vetted anymore as just one thing. It's every fraud. It's the Forex fraud, the derivatives fraud, the gold fraud, the market fraud, every kind of fraud we're being vetted. And, the big dog just got kicked off the porch. And so if you see this kind of scenario happening, what's left? Where do we go from there? I think it was Steve Quayle that said it a couple of months ago. Is this going to be America going to have a fire sale like Greece where the vultures in control have destroyed every single thing and picking off the scraps? What is left here with this scenario. And V said it so eloquently, when this comes home to roost, all this inflation, stagflation, deflation, what happens? What does Joe Lunchbox Carrier, what does Main Street America look like when all this takes place? I mean, I shudder to think, but I can only think of Germany about 1938.
Yeah, I've been hearing that so much lately, that comparison. Folks, by the way, 661-244-9839. That's 661-244-9839. But Sheila, I was the other day I had to pick up some coffee and cream for the office, and I was walking through this grocery store, and I walked by. I don't buy steak, I mean, who among us can really afford, a T-bone steak or a porterhouse steak? And I looked at the price, and I thought, it was like $12, $13 a pound. And I'm thinking, that's just crazy. And I'm looking at the different prices and seeing how the middle class is under assault. I mean, to me, the middle class is the target class here in America and Canada, well, all throughout the world. But having said all that as a preface to my question, I guess, and this is a compilation of various questions. I'm looking here from, I don't know, probably a half a dozen people, Aaron, Ken, Jeff, John, so on. Sheila, with all the guests that you've interviewed and all the information that you know right now, if you were to just speculate on the rest of this year, what do you see taking place?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I've had so many interesting people, and I've had such experts in areas, and I think the big, forget the sweep of every penny here, and forget all this Dodd-Frank and Glass-Steagall and this absolute, economic meltdown. But I think it's the priority over human life, over the sovereignty of nations, over everything that's valued in our nation or once was. Like I said, it's not America's not the last bastion. It was the first and only. And whatever happened to the pride in America now? I mean, people think, oh, well, we're just the laughing stock of the world. I think we got to get back to that. I don't know, call it the Texas Ranger spirit. I think, Doug, we have got to get back to. There's a song. It's by Travis Tritt, and he's talking in this song, and you can Google this song. It's called "The Sign of the Times." And he says, my daddy told me stories about how this country was back when I was just a kid, and how people took the time to care and took a lot of pride in the things they did. And he said, and I can't help but wonder what happened to that spirit deep down through the years. And that's kind of the pinnacle of where I'm at, where I feel. I think we got to get back to the basics here, Doug. Again, we have to have a quantum shift, a shift in our thinking, and get back to how things were. I mean, look at when you grew up. There was never any talk about vetting or the dollar being an issue. There was never any talk about all the things that are talked about now. This is all sci-fi headlines, but I think we can turn the tables. We can turn the tide on these hucksters. And again, there's power in numbers, and we have got to get back to the place where we're going to say, you know what, just like at Bundy Land, you're not doing this. The posse shows up, the cowboys, whatever. That spirit of America, I think, is still alive, and we have got to get back to the Christian values. I mean, they've taken the Lord's Prayer to the school. Ever since they did that, I've just seen a steamroll, rocket sled downhill decline of everything. We got to put God back as number one. We got to get on our knees and repent for what we've allowed with this, absolute Marxist minion megalomaniac Bathhouse Barry and his, gang of thugs. Get them out of there. Hey, I'm all for bringing treason charges back. That's what I say. And I'm really working on a campaign in June to try to really get some things going with some constitutional lawyers to take back some things. But, I mean, we got to get on our knees and our faces before God, repent, and I think that's the turning point right there. He said that he will respond to our prayer, and I think if we have enough people doing that, we can turn the tides here, Doug.
Interesting. Aaron sent me a link to to, I believe it's to his website. It's I'm for Jesus Ministries. Okay, now, folks, you can search that I'm for Jesus Ministries. And what you just said just now, and this is why I'm bringing this up right now, is because Aaron sent me a link. Looks like right before the program began. This is something he wrote back in February, where he woke up one morning with a burning in his bones, with a clear view of the heavens and an understanding that our adversaries' advance team for an uprising in our country is digging in, building their forward posts, and preparing to bring us what we are witnessing in Ukraine to the shores of America. And he said 8 months ago. Now, Sheila, we did a series of broadcasts, a 5-week, at the request of people within, actually, believe it or not, people within the intelligence community who are on our side. And, of course, W was one of the advocates of this. But we did a series of programs, Sunday night programs, where we brought together Christians from around this nation and other nations in repentance, prayer, and fasting for this country. And you know what, Sheila? I believe, truthfully, and so does Aaron, right? Believe that really had an effect, a positive effect in the heavenly realm. Now, that's not to elevate us to some sort of, that's not to say, yay us, look what we've done. But prayer works, fasting works. Getting on your knees and repenting, it really works. And so you sound like you're right down in that level of right down in the trenches there of being a prayer warrior and really attacking the spiritual problems of our country rather than relying on the next election. Is that what I'm
hearing? Well, I think,
obviously?
Doug, like a 1,000,000-man march to me is useless. I think a 1,000,000-man team on their knees is very powerful, because how many have we've seen these, the truckers hammer down to D.C., we've seen the 1,000,000 mask march, and then we've seen this little anonymous thing that I'm not so sure about that movement. We've seen all these masked marches and million whatever, and the thing is, how effective have they been till now? And I think that's the thing we have to think about is, we know that these hedonistic hucksters have rigged, siphoned, manipulated everything. The powers that be, they want a New World Order. We know that. And the playbook has been to take as much prosperity, liberty, wealth, everything from the Americas. Death is imminent. The sort of Anglo-American financial empire is collapsing. The system's rigged. The U.S. is heading toward a third world country status faster than Chris Christie can chow down a Big Mac. But the point is that this is the time when we're dealing with people, a Luciferian eugenics plan. That's really when you get into you just kind of brush away the surface and really get down into the nitty-gritty, go down the rabbit hole. That's what we're dealing with. And so we have to attack that on a spiritual level. And what does God say again and again? We're not fighting flesh and blood. We're fighting against principalities of darkness. And he tells us how we fight, and he gives us weapons of warfare. So if we've got the helmet of salvation and we've got the word of God, the shield of the sword, it's pretty simple. The Bible really does equip us with exactly our fighting tools. So what part of that don't we get, I guess, is my question.
That's a great question. By the way, Sheila Zielinski is our guest, the Weekend Vigilante, hard linked off of our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com. On the right-hand column, of course, you can find the link to her website show. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's take some calls if that's all right, Sheila. We have a bunch of people on hold waiting to
I absolutely
to
will take calls, but I need to finish a quick thing here because I just got inundated. I actually just checked my email, and I've got about 75 emails that says to please finish your story about getting kicked out of your church. Well, very quickly, just the Coles Notes version is, one of my elders teams approached me and said, listen, we don't really like the name of your show. And I said, well, I don't really care what you like. And they said, well, we think it's very, it's not a very good name for, a strong Christian woman. And I said, well, here's the thing. Jesus was considered by the Pharisees to be a bit of a rebel, wasn't he? Even maybe a vigilante. And I said, so, I'm keeping the name, get over the name kind of thing. And then they said, well, we listened to your show, and you were cutting down Rick Warren. How dare you? How dare you talk about Joel Osteen? And so that's kind of the nuts and bolts of how that happened. Is they didn't like the fact that I was calling some of these telepickpocketists and the name it, claim it, genie rubbing bottle crew. I don't know what you call these guys, but I think they've moved fast and furious away from the real gospel, and we've got something else now, diluted. I think of I was watching a commercial on light beer, Joe, the other day, and I thought, this is what we have in America. We have light Christianity, and I don't want it. So, yeah, that's that story.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Christianity light. I like that.
The lukewarm is exactly what it is, and we know what you're talking about. So let's go to the phones here. We're going to go to area code 765 first. 765. We're coming to you. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with our guest, Sheila Zielinski. What's on your mind tonight?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Hey, Doug and Joe, I got to tell you, it is a pleasure to hear the truth. I'm Dave from Indiana. Been listening to you guys for a couple of years. First-time caller. And I wanted to ask you guys, all three of you actually, and Sheila is absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. Sheila, she's been on Dave Hodges' show, yes?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, December 8th. Yes, I was just recently.
Yeah, so this is like the second or third time I've heard you, and I'm going to be checking out your website. I wanted to ask all three of you, have you guys ever heard of the Lost 10 Tribes of Israel?
Sheila, obviously Joe and I have, but Sheila, go ahead and take that if you'd like.
Yes, we have heard of it. I guess I would have to ask, what's the actual question?
Okay, well, if you give me just a couple of minutes to go over a couple of scriptures. The first one, Matthew 10:6. It actually starts in the middle of verse 5, and Jesus says, "Do not go into the way of the Gentiles, and do not enter a city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." And that's what
Caller,
Jesus
when you're talking about the 10 tribes, though, you are referring to because see, when I think of the lost 10 tribes of Israel, I think of the northern kingdom of Israel, and sort of the ancient, traditionally thought to be separate from the ones that Moses included in the ephod. So we're thinking of Dan and Reuben and Gad and Asher. The tribes disappeared from the text of the Hebrew scriptures after they were invaded and conquered, kind of around, I don't know when it was, 7-something BCE. So you're talking, though, about the same group.
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct. And they disappeared between 721 BC and 718 BC. Okay? They disappeared. They didn't die. They disappeared. So if you go now to the book of James in the New Testament, the very first sentence in the book of James says, "To the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings." And so in the book of James, and the book of James was written in the 1st century A.D., not long after Jesus died. And James obviously was one of the apostles. And James starts out the book of James with the sentence, "To the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greetings." And so a lot of preachers will say that the 12 tribes disappeared from history and they are no longer a factor. But I know for a fact there are over 1 million people in the United States that would dispute that. And so, and Glenn Beck even knows this. There's a 15-minute video on YouTube where Glenn Beck explains where those lost tribes went to. And so, if you give me just a couple of minutes here, I'll try to make it as quick as I can.
Well, Dave, let's hurry up a little bit. Where are you headed with this?
I'm headed with this. What I'm telling you is that people will say, preachers will say, that the United States of America is not mentioned anywhere in the Bible. And I disagree with that. I think the United States of America is mentioned in the Bible more than any other nation. We are known in the Bible as Israel, and the Jewish people in the Middle East are known in the Bible as Judah.
Well, here's my thoughts on that, Dave, just very quickly, because I know that I'm sure they have other callers, is the bottom line is, whether Jew or Gentile, we, any of us that have salvation in Christ and are obedient, I believe, we have that redemptive authority that, we have the same power that raised Christ from the dead living in us. So, whether it's 12 tribes or 10 tribes or however many tribes, bottom line is whether, Isaac talked about this, and so did Solomon. Isaac, Jacob, and their lineage talked about the Jews and Gentiles. So, all of that aside, if we have salvation in Christ, we are the redeemed. So, we're blood-bought property, anybody that has that salvation. And when we look to God, that's really the important piece I think we need to be focused on, not getting off on just different kind of doctrines and biblical paths that are probably maybe irrelevant or not.
Well, glad you took that.
You just, whatever you did, Joe, you just cut yourself right off.
I'm sorry. Okay. Thanks for answering that question, Sheila, and thanks, caller, for that call. We're going to move on here to area code 480. We're coming to you next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Sheila Zielinski.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
All right. Hey, this is Randy again in Texas. You guys I called in that one time, was just really distraught, and you guys prayed with me, and I got a better job and all that kind of stuff.
That's right. That's right.
Randy.
Yeah. Sheila, this is a caller who, just give you a quick background, called upset, sales job, tough job, and we just guided him as best we could, but much better now it sounds. But go ahead, Randy. What's up?
Yeah. Hey. Anyway, I just I know I had mentioned something about the IRS when I was really distraught, and I just wanted to share with people. We talk about. Yeah, Sheila's right. We need to be on our knees, and but I think that people also need to start looking at understanding where they really stand as far as income taxes, because 90% of us aren't liable for the income tax. And when you understand that, there's a...
Yeah. I just want to say that and I'm sure Sheila will agree, that we can do an entire program on the income tax system and about the voluntary assessment,
Yes.
But go ahead, Randy. What's your question?
Well, I don't know if it was really much of a question. It's just an urging of the listening audience to really research. There's a website, losthorizons.com. Peter Hendrickson wrote a book called Cracking the Code, The Fascinating Truth About Taxation in America. when he finally researched the U.S. Code in digitized format and literally discovered that all the definitions and terms they use in the law are for very specific, very narrow applications, and 90% of us don't fall into that, and that it's totally constitutional. But because of the street terms and the definitions they use, people get duped into thinking that, they're subject to the income taxes. And the IRS is about 90.
Randy, we got you, my friend. We're gonna cut your question or cut your comment off there and turn to Sheila, because Sheila, one of the things that we do talk about, and especially, W talks about this as well. Irwin Schiff is a friend of his, and Irwin Schiff is in prison, basically in prison for life, because of income tax, and one of the issues during his trial, they brought up, or his defense attorney brought up, show me in the law where the income tax is actually rooted in law, not in court decisions, but in the Constitution and law. And they could not find any. What's your take on the income tax as it is right now in America, Sheila?
Oh, wow. That is one, that's a big can of worms that you're opening up, Doug. I think that's a whole show in itself. But, I mean, there's a lot of parameters around the War Measures Act that talk about what it was what the intention of it first was. So it's really interesting. I think there's a lot of very illegal components to the way people are taxed, not just with their income, but taxation, period. I mean, I'm kind of more of a supporter of a flat tax, going back to like a flat tax system. But I mean, it's treasonous, and it's, like I said, it's a very, very big topic to link it. And on my old YouTube channel, I actually did a series on illegal income tax, and I talked about, how it's grounded in the law, but also under the War Measures Act, what it was originally designed for, and it's spiraled into something completely different. And I mean, I have a close insider that worked for IRS that was divulging some of the pieces that, it's staggering what's happening on all fronts here when the, president can illegally spy on journalists and also use the IRS to harass his enemies, and expand these unconstitutional spy programs against the American people. And then, if that doesn't work, well, DHS will just declare war against the Christians and the veterans, and you use the word vilification. I mean, it is just unbelievable, these deliberate acts of treason. And yet it's funny because it's all based on, look at Obamacare. I mean, that was his very first, I think he actually sanctioned that during his inaugural speech. He actually had that ready to churn out. And remember what Nancy Pelosi said? Let's just pass it and find out. Forget what's in it. So, I mean, this is what we're dealing with. So, that's a whole big other topic that we would have to do a whole show on that. I think it's very interesting, and I think the caller has some great points. But it's also explaining to it in a way that's palatable for people, too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we have to understand, too, Sheila, that starting with the Federal Reserve and then the passage of course, the 16th Amendment and so on, I do believe that we've been hoodwinked into really the graduated income tax, which is a plank of the communist agenda here. And, of course, that's, that abolishing private property. We're seeing all of this in play right now. Before we go back to the phones, Richard K. wants to know how long you think that we've got with respect to the current economic system, if you think that the economy is going to implode first or be a trigger mechanism before anything else. We'll say before like an EMP. Now, these are my words now, not Richard's, but like, is the economy the most dire threat that we're facing right now?
Well, it's so funny because I almost thought, well, it's taken us 100 years, boys. So I mean, because think about the entire history of America, how it was anchored in gold and silver. You know, and I think about some of the things V says, I mean, how it's kind of stood as a standard and protected people from corrupt banksters for more than 50 years. But if you really go, I mean, and think about what Jefferson said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up will deprive the people of their property, and also their children will wake up homeless. So let's flash forward. You know, you've got Lincoln financing a war of aggression. Flash forward to that, and you've got in 1907, and everybody can Google this, J.P. Morgan, the good old financial luminary that he was, created such a spiral of turmoil when he crashed the New York Stock Exchange, implementing a central bank fiasco in the scourge that is what you just said, Doug, the 1913 Federal Reserve. So think about it for a minute. You create this unrestricted and unregulated 100-year-old Federal Reserve fox watching over the gold-filled henhouse, and Bretton Woods had a major flaw, and this is one thing Salente and V maybe have never explained, but there was nothing stopping the Fed from printing and expanding the supply of Federal Reserve notes, and of course, no thanks to Nixon, he issued a decree and then flooded the world with these paper dollars. So where am I going with this is that, you know, we springboard from that to the war on drugs, the U.S. oil deals with OPEC, and you're only selling in U.S. dollars. You know, all these foreign oil deals made our nation require every person, so that's Saudi Arabia and everybody else, to, require these Federal Reserve notes, so hence the petrodollar scheme. So we had an oil-backed currency outspending all the nations of the world, creating this military juggernaut and undisputed heavyweight superpower status. So the question to answer that is, we had an unlimited credit card in the New York Federal Reserve, so that's what really America had, is a ching-ching credit card. So now, you know, you flash forward to where we're at now. What underpinned the American supremacy? What did? Well, one thing was a world reserve currency, and the second thing was the might and supremacy of their military. Well, guess what? Where's our military right now, and where's our dollar headed? So to answer your question in a long way, I think we're maybe months away from seeing the implosion of all this, really. That's what I really do believe. I think we're seeing an all-out economic meltdown right before us. But again, you know, according to Clown News Network, crickets chirping, nothing to see here, folks. We're in recovery. That's their buzzword, and I don't think we're in recovery. In fact, that's an all-out lie from the pit. It's very bleak. Let's just put it that way.
I was in a waiting room this weekend, and I think you know what? It was Fox News that was on in the waiting room where I was sitting, and it was in the morning. It was a replay of the Sunday morning show where two financial analysts. We are in a recovery. I think one was from GM, perhaps.
Yeah.
One was from.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that or not, but
yeah,
I was. You know, I wanted to throw things at the TV had I not been in public. But we're up against the top of the hour break. Sheila, you've been very gracious with your time. On the other side here, I've got a question from someone who wants to know if you heard, and you can answer this on the other side, if you heard what Sergeant Dan Page had to say about, or say to, the Oath Keepers in Missouri. That's the question which you can take on the other side.
That's a question before the break.
Yes.
And she did not catch the question, so if you could ask again.
Sure. And I'd like to echo the sentiment that she's been very gracious with her time. And, you know, folks, we're all voices in the wilderness here. At least that's how we perceive ourselves. We're not funded by any big corporations, nor will we ever be if we want to be really true to the truth. We do what we can to educate the public. We attempt to bring the cutting-edge truth to you. And, you know, if one thing, if you feel led and you feel blessed, I mean, Sheila is, look, I know Sheila could be living out of her car. I'm not saying she is, but she could be living out of her car, for crying out loud, and she would not ask for a dime or anything. That's the kind of person that Sheila is. So if you see fit, if you have benefited from Sheila, folks, go to her website It's linked off of HomelandSecurityUS.com, and tell her how much you appreciate her via email. Certainly, she accepts donations to stay on the air, to pay her bills. Look, we intend to support Sheila as well, and I know that she's traveling to Montana. She's going to be a blessing there to all of us as well. So keep her in your prayers, and certainly if you're blessed by what she has to say, the information, all of her work. We were talking last week, I think, and this is the way it is for people like us. If with the exception of very few people, I mean, my goodness, if you really dollar cost average our work versus our return, we'd be we would be in trouble, right? It just doesn't work out very well. But that said, certainly tell Sheila how much you've enjoyed having her with us, and of course, if you feel so led, certainly help her out as well via her PayPal. It's any little bit helps. My goodness, and even the words of encouragement and prayers help. But the question before the break, there was Sergeant Major Dan Page speaking to the St. Charles, Missouri chapter of Oath Keepers, explained how they, meaning the government, the criminal cabal within the government, plan to end American sovereignty and usurp the Constitution, which I kind of think has already been done, thus establishing martial law and merging the U.S. with the New World Order, perhaps even starting with the North American Union. Have you heard about this? Did you watch, did you see, did you read any comments by this Sergeant Major Dan Page, Sheila?
No, I didn't read the comments about Sergeant Major Dan Page, but what I was kind of the angle that I found interesting over the weekend was I was watching a group of individuals at the ranch who, I don't know if again this is part militia or some ex-oath keepers. I mean, I think about Stuart Rhodes. I mean, they literally ran him right off the ranch, and they literally said, we're oath keepers are banned off the ranch, and if they return, they're just going to get escorted off. So I don't know who this group leader is that's making these comments to Rhodes, but he actually told him out and out he was lucky he wouldn't get shot in the back, because he said that's what happens to deserters on the battlefield. And I remember him saying those words. And so, again, I don't know what happened with Stuart Rhodes. Oath Keepers' motto is not on our watch, and I know they kind of have their, there's different people. There's factions of splits now on that ranch. So I really don't know. I'm not up to par on this video that your caller or your guest is talking about, your other guy there.
Okay, and I'm glad you brought that up. And folks, please hear me very carefully on this. Now, was it last week or perhaps the week before, we had Jerry DeLemus. He was on as a guest, and ladies and gentlemen, you remember him from his appearance, very emotional appearance. He was left from New Hampshire, drove to the Bundy Ranch, was a part of the New Hampshire, not really part of a militia, but ended up being that way. And as time progressed, when the Oath Keepers came in, there seemed to be this extreme animosity among a very small grouping of people that ended up with, you're right, Sheila, the Oath Keepers were unwelcomed, if you will, from or opted out of being a part of what was taking place at the ranch. And there was some nasty stuff going on inside the ranch itself. There was infighting and I mean, almost guns, people drawing down on others, and it was really crazy. And the Oath Keepers, when they did a video, when Stuart Rhodes did a video, there were, I think, 4 people in this one video that lasted for over an hour. And one of the men, as well as Stuart Rhodes himself, mentioned Jerry DeLemus as part of the problem. Okay, now, again, I'm probably not being fair to Jerry or being fair to the situation by trying to cram a lot of information into a short period of time. But the bottom line is this. After looking at and making some inquiries as to what exactly happened there. You know what, Sheila? I'm beginning to think that because of the way this all happened so quickly, there were people that came into the ranch, volunteered their time, that were there to provoke something much more than what was intended. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think from what I understand, there's now an armed citizen faction at the ranch kind of openly talking about the possibility of this impending drone strike. That was sort of the last that I heard about it, and there's kind of more factions, inside the ranch that are feuding, and there's divide amongst the patriots, and, so that's really disconcerting to me in itself because, again, I think the sort of that last rancher standing that I talked about earlier, that kind of spirit of the Texas Ranger thing, I don't think the BLM these minions were prepared for what happened when these cowboys stood up and said, no, you're not going to do this. And I think that sort of showed backbone and grit in the face of tyranny because, as I mentioned before, you got a sniper nest up there and they're saying lethal force. It takes a lot of backbone and courage to say, well, then bring it, bring the heat because that's what they were doing. And so I think, what really breaks my heart, and it actually just reminds me of the way the church is all split off into these factions too. There is just such an eclectic mishmash of misinformation, disinformation, COINTELPRO, disinfo agents, massive psyops everywhere. This is a sci-fi because, they want this in-house fighting. They want running roughshod over the citizens. They want a war in the citizenry. But, hey, why not just have the citizens fighting themselves? It's just such a virulent example, again, Doug, about how things can just spiral out of control when we're not keeping focused on, I guess we're not keeping focused on what God wants. And I think that's the sad part of this, when we get off on a tangent and we're running over here and we're running over here and we're kind of being very, we're not necessarily being proactive, but we're being very responsive. And I think that's a dangerous place when we're not being proactive, but we're being reactive. And so, I think that's a dangerous place. I think it's all, it's very showing it's telling what the government is kind of testing the waters again, hey?
Very much so. And if we can use the ranch as a mere example, and I'm not saying this is what has happened or what would happen, but if it were me, for example, going to a ranch, now I don't have military experience, missed Vietnam by not too much, but having said that, as a civilian without military experience, I certainly would defer to those with military experience to handle the military operational aspect of that scenario. And what I see taking place are people that have purchased an AR-15, we'll say, or some other type of gun, and thinking that they are that they're equipped to go head to head with the enemy, these combat veteran BLM agents or the subcontractors brought in, when in fact that probably should be best left to those people with combat experience, military experience, such as the Oath Keepers who have this level of experience. But what I see taking place is egos getting in the way, just like on the talk shows.
Well, you're out. Yeah, egos in the way. Well, when I had Greg Evenson, I was talking about this Clive and Bundy standoff, and it's funny because one of the things I remember sticking out. He's a former lawman, he's ex-military, and state trooper, and I asked him. I said, Greg, what is legitimate legal authority? What is legal law? Because I said I thought that all law was subject to the Constitution. We don't have any rights anymore, Doug. We have permissions and privileges, and I personally think that laws need to be abolished if they're immoral or wrong. And let's not forget that it's said that everything Hitler did was, quote, legal. So you've got this gun grabbing that's been going on, and of course, I don't know if you and Joe saw this headline, Doug, of Bloomberg announcing his new $50 million, gun grab. I call it. He calls it a gun control campaign. But you're seeing again this draconian police state uprising. Forget protecting and serving here. these are law enforcement. They're not protecting and serving. And all the way around, it's just, again, an extirpation of everyone's rights. These men in military and law enforcement have sworn to uphold the Constitution. And I think, I said to Greg, I think of the Lexington Minuteman representing Captain John Parker, and I think of retreating not being an option for the colonists. And I think, men like my grandfather who stormed the beaches of Normandy and took a bullet, he didn't back down. Tens of thousands of GIs over the years watched their comrades bleed and die in the battlefield too. And if one thing boils my blood, Doug, it's a vilification of our veterans. And what's the tipping point here for the citizenry? I guess that's the question. How far does all this have to go? Are we just going to keep giving up everything without a fight, continue to bow down to tyranny like a bunch of cowards on our knees? I'd rather just end it than live on my knees like that to this tyrannical, imperialist, out-of-control rogue government. But I guess what is the next phase? And that's really, if they're pushing these, they're pushing an all-out war in the citizenry, what is the next phase? I guess that would be the question. Who knows what these guys, these hedonistic hucksters, what they're off plotting in the back rooms.
Hedonistic hucksters. I love it. I love it.
Very well said. Let's go back to the phones as we have a whole bank full of callers. We're going to go to 334 area code. 334, you're up next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Is that me?
That is you.
Oh, hi. Good evening. I just wanted to kind of comment on your last topic. I have been following this very, very closely, what's going on at Bundy Ranch. Ever since Steve sent out the alert for prayer back on the 11th or the 12th, I have been attending the situation very, very closely. You did have issues of command and control. There were a lot of volunteers there, a lot of independent militia, a lot of oath keepers, oath keeper head. They had a lot of issues with who's going to do what, when, how, and where. So that was an issue. But the biggest thing came when the oath keepers themselves, Stuart Rhodes, received some intel from a source that he vetted and felt comfortable that his source believed what he was being told, that there was going to be a drone strike on the ranch within 48 hours.
Right, from Dallas. The source was from Dallas,
yes, exactly.
and on a scale of 1 to 10, Stuart Rhodes
he went a 6 or a 7.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
6 or a 7, yeah. But they thought about this, and what they decided to do was to, as he put it, move off the X. And, everybody can 2020, look backwards on that and with 2020 vision. But basically, I think he did what he thought he should do. And he got most of his people out. A few oath keepers stayed behind. But that was taken very harshly among the other people there because basically they weren't leaving. They were there to protect the Bundys. They weren't going to leave the Bundys. And so I think the perception there, and I did see the video of the council of militia there, and I thought that was a little rough, but I think emotions were very high. These people are very tired. And I do know that Jerry DeLamus did decide to stay with the militia forces there, and Stuart Rhodes will tell you, in fact, their website will tell you they are not militia. They have a very specific task. If you go to their website, they'll tell you we're an educational force, and we're here to remind current and former law enforcement and military that we will not obey these specific unlawful orders, which is a good thing. And, I've followed Stuart Rhodes for a long time, so I understand his underlying motivation is to get men who have been trained to kill to consider not killing the American populace. Okay?
Okay.
When you boil it right down, that's what it is. I don't have a thing against Oath Keepers. But
nor do we.
Yeah, no, and I don't think you do either. But on the other hand, there are militia units out there who are specifically tasked with defending and protecting, and the Oath Keepers are not. This is not part of their problem. This is not part of their
Caller, I think that this
mission.
case involving Clive and Bundy is really the bigger piece in all this, whether it's militia or Oath Keepers or whatever it is. I think the bottom line here is this is another case of David versus Goliath in what has become an all too familiar scene in which some agency of the federal government swoops in, flashes their badges and their guns, and they seize control of, whatever, private property, just usurp the American taxpayer with so much as an offering of the pretense of the due process of law. And I think, again, the extirpation of our constitutional freedoms, I think that's huge. And I think that is we're seeing the pillaging, plunder of everything, pilfering even, I'll throw in there. Again, those pirate terms to describe what's unfolding. Every single time we turn around, there's another visceral example of absolute tyranny, and that David versus Goliath in this, again, all too familiar scene, running roughshod over the citizens, and I think it's time it stopped.
And thank you for that call. Sheila, kind of switching gears here, I wanted to get your opinion on this, and I didn't get a chance to ask earlier in the first hour. Obamacare. We've seen the rollout of Obamacare. I know you're not in America, but what do you see
at the moment?
What do you see here happening with Obamacare, and what do you see it doing to the American people and the economy and small businesses here in the near future?
Well, I absolutely think that this is one massive piece of legislation. You have to understand, again, he was talking about it on his inaugural. I think that this is the most duplicitous, treasonous puppet ever. And again, he's a puppet. He's following his orders. I think the rollout of this is just scandalous. There's no other word. It is, if you really get into the nitty-gritty of what's in this thing, we're talking about, radio frequency identification, chipping devices. We're talking about some sci-fi things in this legislation. This bill in itself is just an atrocity, and I think the big piece is, I think, that the fact that they're trying to, exempt all of Congress from it, but they're going to jam it down your throats. That to me is just absolute. It teeters on the brink of ridiculousness. I don't have any words to say than scrap it. Tell Barry where he can stick his Obamacare fiasco, I might add.
And I agree. And you said something about the RFID. I've done hours and probably days of research on this topic. They're moving in with these electronic health records and medical devices. How long do you think before they make an RFID chip or some type of digital chip mandatory for all people, like the Bible says in Revelation about the mark of the beast?
Well, I think we're seeing a freight train rolling down the track already. We've already got basically a cashless society. Then you've got Regina Dugan at DARPA there when she was the head saying, we've got these trendy little tattoos that now we just stick on the surface of the skin, and apparently they amalgamate into the flesh now, and that's trendy. I think we're kind of fast and furious speed training down this track of RFID being rolled out very quickly. You've got some, even churches now, you've got these devils in the pulpit talking about the fact that they, it's a good thing to be, they can find your children. They're talking about, some legislation I've heard some intel on that they're planning on chipping all infants by 2017. It's absolutely just atrocious, and over my dead body we'll be getting an RFID implant. But I know the Mexican police have already been mandatorily told that they're going to be chipped, and some have said they already have been. So, what's the truth, and, what's opinion versus, real on-the-ground intel? Well, that's really the question, isn't it? The bottom line is, under no circumstance should anybody ever consider having these RFID chips or tattoos or anything else.
Right. No, I agree, and we don't know if the RFID chip specifically will end up being, what the mark of the beast is. But right now, in my mind, it looks like one of the top candidates, especially at the rate it's being pushed. And the president issues proclamations and strategies on their new biosurveillance or the 21st century digital government plan, and it just looks like it's heading in that direction. Let's go back to the phones. We're going to go to area code 269. 269. Thanks for holding. We're coming to you next. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Sheila Zielinski.
Hi. Hi, Doug and Joe and Sheila. Nice to talk to you, Sheila.
Hi.
I've been a fan for not that long, a couple months maybe, but you're excellent, and it's a pleasure to listen to you tonight. I just have a question about the mark of the beast. What's your opinion? Do you think that, according to what the Bible says, that people will know what they're doing when they take the mark? Will they know it's the mark of the beast?
Is that posed to me?
Oh, yes, Sheila.
I guess anyone who wants to answer, but...
Okay,
yeah.
Well, the Bible, depending on what version you read, I mean, obviously, if you go to Revelation 13:17, it says they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. So, I mean, depending on what version, I mean, it's all really the same thing, that even in the King James Bible, it says no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So what really we're seeing here is that the inability to be able to sell anything, buy anything. So, I mean, it would be part and parcel, I believe. It's kind of in line with this Fast and Furious speed train down the track of the cashless society. And I really do, I mean, I think the two are sort of part and parcel of the same thing. It might not necessarily be, I think it's a precursor to the mark of the beast. And do I believe that you will not know that you get it? Absolutely not. Like some people used to say years ago, oh, well, we might get it in a vaccination. These chips, for them to put it in your body, you'd know that you had it. Unless you were absolutely, laying in a coma and somebody injected it to you. I mean, I'm pretty sure that you're going to know that this thing is going into you, unless, again, you're in a coma or you're, under anesthetic or something, which would be a tragedy. But I don't think people are going to be accountable for what they don't know. So my answer would be you'd know.
God's not going to, and caller, I think I can speak to your question, and Sheila, I think I agree with you. We will, for us to accept the mark, we will have to accept it knowingly, and knowingly. I'm not going to say willingly, but at least knowingly, knowing that we will be exchanging salvation for the ability to conduct commerce or to live another day or whatever the contingency is. Is that what I hear you saying?
I absolutely
I wasn't so much speaking as far. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
Go ahead, caller.
I don't think that people will not know that they're taking something. What I'm questioning is whether they'll realize that it's the mark of the beast that they're taking.
And Sheila, I think you said that we're not going to be fooled unless we're, unless we're a slab of meat on a table somewhere, and even then, are we going to be responsible for what happens if we're unable to make a conscious decision? My theory is no. I mean, my belief is no. That we're going to be forced to decide. That's kind of where I'm at. But caller, thank you very much.
Have any of you done any research on whether or not this implant changes your DNA?
I have, yes. Sheila, what about you?
I've heard something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that, different DNA markers. I mean, Steve Quayle also, Chris Putnam, Tom Horn, all these guys are talking about different kinds of things that are happening when they start mucking genetically with, depending on what way they're going to infuse it into the body. But, I think the whole thing is a bad idea, whether or not we want to realize that we're getting it or realize that is the chip. Some churches are in the school of, no, that's not really the chip. This isn't really the mark of the beast. But let's just, bank on the safe side and say it is. I mean, I'm not exchanging my salvation for anything going inside me if I can avoid it. So the willing statement, I think, Doug, you nailed it.
Thank you. And caller, thank you so much for your call. Sheila, you mentioned Chris Putnam. Now, this Thursday, you've got a show with Chris Putnam. Folks, Sheila's show is The Weekend Vigilante. Sheila, what time is your show on?
Again, I'm not sure. I might end up having to do a pre-record, and that's the first time I would ever do a pre-recorded show, just because, again, I'm not hosting anywhere right at this minute. As of last Thursday, when I ended my show with John B. Wells, I'm what they call a free agent.
Okay.
So we'll see. If I may or may not have a venue, but in any event, I'll pre-record it and I'll stick it onto YouTube, because that's going to be a really good show talking about his book. And I know you had him on with Steve Quayle not that long ago. What an articulate, incredible. I mean, I've read, I have all of Tom and Chris's books. I've got, Petrus Romanus, and I just encourage, if you have not read Petrus Romanus, folks, get a copy of that. Just an articulate, incredible man. He's got a new book coming out May 15th. What an amazing, incredible individual. I can't say enough about Chris.
Well, and I'll say this, Sheila, whatever we can do to assist you as a free agent, however we can assist you, the entirety of the staff resources of our program are with you. So whatever you need, you just let us know. Because, and you, folks, I'm going to tell you, Sheila is a great, if you haven't listened to her program, you've got to listen to her programs. Go back into her archives. Sheila, you're a great interviewer. You're a great, and I'm not just trying to flatter you with, baselessly. You do get, you ask some very pointed, very direct questions, and it's what people are thinking. I've listened to an interview. You've asked the very questions I was thinking when you asked them. So that's a sign of a good interviewer. So thank you so much for that. Okay, moving along here.
All right, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to area code 304. 304, thanks for holding. You're live with Sheila Zielinski on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. This is Phil from West Virginia.
Hey, Phil.
Nice to talk to you guys again. I don't get on very much anymore. I'm working at night. Let's go to the ether a little bit here. The end of the age, the war in heaven being brought down to earth, and what's going to happen here on earth when that war is finally here, and the beings above that don't want to come down here because they know where they're going. It's very much in my heart these days, and very much in my time, and it never seems to go away. I just like your idea on that. It comes right down from Adam and Eve all the way to now, and we're in the final generation, as far as I know, and we're seeing these things unfold before us, and it's a wonderful time to live, and it's very. My heart's racing. Where do we go as a nation, as a people of God? Can you describe one without the other? The people without the war coming to us, and we are here to defend. I guess we're here to defend heaven, and heaven's here to defend us, and it all works hand in hand.
Well, I think there's a cosmopolitan of things happening here. I mean, we've also talking about a war in the world, because the war of the worlds is unfolding literally before our eyes, too. And, I mean, look at how much we're getting groomed for these extraterrestrial kinds of scenarios. I mean, every other day in the media now they're talking about, this is coming, and Bill Clinton now weighing in on this. I mean, it's really interesting how we're sort of being prepared for different kind of scenarios, and the Bible is really clear on it. I did a really great interview, and I think one of the best people that really have a handle on the abyss when it opens is Russ Dizdar, and we actually talk about this on my show, and it's archived on my website, and I think he really gets into this, what a possible scenario, looks like, and how this thing might play out. Steve Quayle has also touched on it quite a bit. So, I mean, there's a lot of possible scenarios of how this thing looks, boots on the ground. But in any event, I don't think it's going to be well, what does the Bible say? It's like nothing we've ever experienced before. I mean, all hell will be breaking loose.
That's what I'm trying to say, and that's what I hear every day. Is I hear this, what we're going to do to you, what we're going to do to you. This is what I hear from them, from that side, is what I should be so scared of what you're going to do to me. Let me turn that around. You better be worried about what we're going to do to you.
Well, I know here's the good news, that we have a promise. We have promises over and over in the Word that we have God as our refuge. He is our strong tower. So really, that's really it, isn't it?
It is, and that's what that's the hope I want people to understand is, I mean, they can tell us in our face all day long what they're going to do to us. You know what? In my Bible it says, you better worry about what's going to happen to you.
Well, caller, I just wish that Satan knew, that Satan knew or was reminded from us, the Christians, that he's defeated. And we know where he's going to, we know his demise.
Yes, Sheila. And I appreciate your work and all your guests you have, and you are a great interviewer, and God bless you with all that you do, and I see a great future for you, and you just keep doing what you're doing. And thank you.
God bless you, and thanks for that. And again, I mean, that is really, Doug and Joe, that is really the good news in all of this is no matter how ugly it really looks, and there's a scripture that says God laughs at the plans of the wicked. Well, I'm not really laughing here, but I can tell you that we do have to really lean on, rely, and trust in God. I mean, that's really, the message here is that we need to, if you're not right with God, you need to get right with Him. And we need to really be focused on some prayer and fasting and, waging war on this stuff. And let me remind you again, I wish Christians knew this better than he did. Satan knows he's defeated. So he's getting out the big guns. He's ramping things up. But the good news is greater is he that is in us than he that's in the world. And that's what I stand on, the promises of God. That's my hope.
Yeah, we're already fighting from a position of victory. We must merely... Well, not merely, we must occupy until his return. And occupy, of course, that doesn't mean we sit down and, eat pudding cups. Yeah. Yeah. We have a job to do. And I've said this before, I believe that we were all born for this time and in this place, and we all have jobs to do. So, I believe that. Wes writes, and let me ask you this. This is kind of somewhat, I mean, I've heard about this, but let me ask you and tell me if this is relevant or if you've heard about something called the business plot, which was an alleged political conspiracy back in the 30s where retired Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler claimed that, there were some businessmen plotting to create a fascist veterans organization and use it to overthrow overthrow Roosevelt at the time, with Butler as the leader of that organization. In 1934, Butler testified to the Special Committee on Un-American Activities on these claims. And are you familiar with that? The background?
Smedley Butler, and of course he's not alive now, but he really did kind of blow the whistle on the little-known plot that was kind of going on when it comes to kind of the black site production, the road to, some people know it as Road to Rock Bottom. I actually read a book on this, and, he did retire from the Marine Corps, I think somewhere back in the 30s. This was even when my grandfather went to war. And, he faced gunfire, and he was really high-ranking in terms of the military, and I think that he was exposing a lot of things going on, especially Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR's kind of unscrupulous shenanigans, and, a lot of these other things that were going on at the time. So he was kind of the precursor to a lot of these, Edward Snowden types. Really, he's kind of set the stage for whistleblowing as we know it, didn't he?
He did, and I'll tell you, thanks, Wes, and I think that this speaks highly to the degree of intellect of our audience, our listeners. for you to bring up for you to bring this up from a historical context, and even to the extent of what we're seeing today. It's interesting because at the time, and I've based on my research and the periphery at the periphery of this, I do know that the major news media at the time dismissed this as a hoax. It's kind of like if they had Snopes back then, this would be, one of the things that Snopes would debunk. But indeed, my goodness. But Sheila, I've got to tell you, you've been such a gracious guest here. We just have we're in the waning minutes of the program here. Is there anything that we haven't covered tonight that you feel important, imperative that we should cover, regardless of where that might take us?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and I'm so appreciative of your audience, being gracious, and of course you too, Doug and Joe. I mean, you're such very gracious hosts, and really support the work that you do as well. Your guests are very similar, and I just want to encourage you guys that you're out there in the front lines, battling in the trenches like I am, and I know it can be a very thankless job. But I love what that cool baritone vibrato Mr. John B. Wells said on my show. Of course, everybody know he got fired from Coast to Coast for, they were pretty much scrutinizing everything that he was doing, and finally, they parted ways. But I think the interesting thing he said, and I really found this interesting, and he really said, you're witnessing, folks, a modern-day Nazi takeover. And then we kind of looped that into this very nefarious eugenics plan. And I think it was interesting because I said at the beginning of this program, and, I'll say it again, I mean, it's kind of rather odd that it comes in a Disney movie, but that cricket or whatever that character was from A Bug's Life, he said, you let one end stand up to us, they might all stand up. And that's really my message, is I really believe there's power in numbers, Doug and Joe. And like John said, if you don't like GMO, stop buying them. If you don't like Walmart, quit shopping there. You don't like the price of gas, well then, in 30, 60, 90 days, if we had a campaign where we just said, okay, let's pick a target group and let's shut them down. There is power in numbers. We are financing this stuff, and it's like, how you liking the Kool-Aid now, folks? How's it tasting? I mean, quit supporting this stuff, quit dealing with these banks. Go to a credit union. Don't elect an unconstitutional sheriff. There's lots of things we can grassroots do. Go to when have you guys been to a school board meeting with this Common Core? Have you ever talked to your local town councils about Agenda 21? There's lots of things that you guys can be doing, talking to your neighbors, getting involved in different things that are happening in your communities. Maybe some people think, Doug, you can't fight City Hall, but I've been fighting City Hall single-handedly, and I actually am all for bringing back treason charges. I had a story that ran in the Vancouver Sun that, they called me the modern-day Joan of Arc, takes on the big dogs to bring down this, what we're seeing here in Canada is imperialism too. But it was funny because I said I am charging Prime Minister Harper with treason, and the story it literally got swept in all 27 copies of the bought and paid for lamestream media. They just swept it under the rug, and there was one little tiny thing on page 74, woman takes on whatever it was. It was some real little nebulous thing in the bottom of page 74. So, that's what we're dealing with. Our media is bought and paid for, internet. And I think the internet is where the next war is coming, too. I think that's what we're going to really be seeing, especially with, you got to look at what Obama's doing lately. And every other headline is about the war coming to the internet with this kill switch, with the Chinese-style ID. I think that's the next thing, because they didn't expect the new media to awaken the masses either, and people are waking up. So, I want to encourage you people, just, take some hope that God knows what he's doing. And I think, as long as we're under the protection of the Almighty God, we have some hope. I mean, things do look bleak, but, we have that hope too, and I think that's exciting.
And that's the truest and most best way you could put that. We have to seek the Lord every day and make sure we're doing His will, not our own. And as long as we make sure we're doing that on a daily basis, we'll be in the right place at the right time where He wants us to be and under His protection. And people forget that so often and worry about, what they're going to do, trying to imagine how they're going to escape, how they're going to fight, how they're going to do this or that, instead of just giving that to God and seeking His face.
Amen. I couldn't have put that more articulately. Well said, Joe.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You know what, Sheila? It's such a great honor to have you on our program. It really is, and we're going to be looking for that interview with Chris Putnam in whatever venue we may find it. Like I said, you've got our support. Whatever you need from us, we're willing. And
we do have to talk with Sheila off air. Maybe we can call her tomorrow.
Yeah,
because we didn't get a chance to do that today. Just wanted to say that so we didn't forget.
Yeah, sorry about that, Sheila. The hours got away from us today, but I do believe that we are in for a battle here, and what you said about perhaps being months away from maybe something financial. Look, I don't know what the future does hold. I don't know with any degree of precision what is going to happen next, but I do know that we are facing some really rough times, and that we need to stick together, and we need to seek, of course, divine guidance as well, and to read our own mail, look at our own instructions, and find out what we need to be, where we need to be, what we need to be doing. And we can't be one of the other things too. Don't mistake and I don't want to speak for you necessarily, Sheila, but don't mistake our obedience and our acknowledgement of the divine as being pacifist. That's not at all what we are. We in fact, are here to occupy. And again, occupy does not mean putting pops on the couch. We need to do.
Well, you're right. And when you said occupy, Doug, it reminded me of, don't forget that it wasn't out of the realm of possibilities for Jesus to flip some tables over too. I mean, especially with the gangsters in the synagogue. But here's, the bigger piece in all of this, and I agree totally what you just said. But here, and it's not all about sitting around singing Kumbaya while Rome burns around us and having a group hug and, just sitting in mega churches and, because, I walked through a Christian bookstore the other day and my jaw dropped. And I thought, my God, look at these titles. This is just, 5 steps to become Joel Osteen, and, it's a new day. And it's so, like Joe used the word lukewarm. It's so watered down. And I want to encourage people, because this is probably number one thing I get, and I get I get inundated with emails all the time. And one of the things that people often say is, I feel so isolated. I don't belong to a church, or, I can't seem to find a church that has even any kind of a message of the gospel anymore. And, I do not believe in some of the doctrines of these mega churches, but what I can say is you people are not alone. And that's where I think we really have to be asking the Holy Spirit to lead us and guide us to make connections with the people that we have to. And hopefully maybe something will come out of this conference that, I had spoken to Michael, the organizer of it, and I said I'm hoping that this will open up a bigger venue for there to be more people that can, keep in touch, whether it's whatever it is, some kind of a future thing. But I think I just want to encourage people really to know that, Doug and Joe, you're not alone. God knows exactly what's going on, and He's in charge. He's large and in charge, as my pastor used to say. So we really have to trust in that. And we do have to do our part. God will do the part we can't, but we can't just be sitting around either being, keyboard patriots and these little patriotic armchair, keeping the seat warm. We also have to be out there doing stuff. So ask God, what's your part in this? What's your role? How can you, what's your ministry? How can you be out there doing something? And we all have a part to play in this, and I think that's important. And also, pray to God to reveal a church where you can go and get connected with people that are like-minded. He will, trust Him.
Wow. Great words. Sheila Zielinski, the Christian warrior princess of truth. How's that? I'll tell you. A fantastic program. Thank you so much for sharing your evening with us, your time with us tonight. You're very gracious with your time, and you will be in our prayers of protection, prayers of uplifting, and certainly we love it, the fact that we consider you part of our extended family. We really do. And I know
likewise, my friend.
I'll tell you, the number of emails I've been getting just since you've been on the show has been tremendous. So people love you, and we look forward to seeing you in Bozeman and meeting face-to-face. And, of course, we'll be the pretty ones. No, we'll be...
I'm Steve Quayle in a skirt, remember, so you can just look for...
oh, my goodness. That's going to take me a while to get that image out of my head. Oh, my goodness. Sheila, you've been doing great. Well, I
look forward to seeing you guys, too, and I want to encourage people, your listeners, to, come to Montana. If there's any way you can make it happen, I pray for your audience tonight, Doug, that each person would just find a way to go, really, because I think it's just going to be a real transformational experience. And, my favorite part in all of it is all these amazing men of God, these watchmen, is also being under the amazing anointing of the preaching of Pastor David Langford. And if you haven't heard of Pastor Langford, I don't know what rock you were under, but please do go to Voice of Evangelism. That man is he's really one of my favorites, very highly regarded. We love Steve Quayle, we love Greg Evenson, we love Russ Dizdar and all these guys, but we really want to lift up Pastor Langford, because I'll tell you, this is an anointed man of God. And he preaches the word. He's a good old-fashioned anointed Bible preacher that's just on fire for God, and he preaches the truth. And, if you haven't heard him, go and get your tickets if you can, folks. Get them now. Don't wait. And, again, it's just a privilege to come on the show, and we'll see what happens.
God bless you, Sheila. Thank you so much for your time. That was, folks, that was Sheila Zielinski, Weekend Vigilante. That's her show. Free agent at the moment.
WeekendVigilante.com is a website.
That's right. But as I said, send her an email of support. Visit her website. Of course, and I'm sure you've had, folks. I'm sure you've found great information, great uplifting from her. So, think about supporting her as well as you can, because she is a much needed